Greetings, it's me again, Jeff, your companion on these long, cold nights. Tonight, we have a very special story. It's actually a series of letters sent in by a night shift security guard at an art gallery. He introduces himself as Frank H. Sometimes seemingly ordinary jobs hide terrifying secrets that only those involved truly understand. And Frank, he sent me his entire story via email, divided into several parts. I'll read them to you one by one. Turn off the lights, brew a hot cup of coffee, and listen to the story of Frank H., the guardian of paintings, or rather, the protector of humanity from paintings. To all who are listening, my name is Frank Hall. I'm a night shift security guard at an art gallery, but my job isn't to protect the paintings. I still vividly remember my interview 2 years ago. My naive words at the time, "I want this job." Those simple words still send shivers down my spine when I think about them now. The gallery felt strangely empty at the time. Ms. Amy Andrews, the gallery owner, sat across from me, asking questions that left me flustered, but her composure never wavered. "Are you a believer in the spiritual, Mr. Hall?" Ms. Andrews asked. "Yes, I am," I replied. "Are you talking about art? I'm afraid I can't offer any profound philosophical or religious insights." "Don't worry," Ms. Andrews smiled. "I'm not trying to challenge you in any way. My question relates to the paintings, but perhaps not in the way you might think. I was a police officer for many years before becoming a security guard at the embassy," I said. "I have excellent references." The gallery owner raised a hand, smiling politely. "I've seen your resume. You don't need to prove anything. Mr. Hall, I know you are physically capable, but this job, it takes a mental toll." I nodded, naively thinking I understood her. "I know, I've worked many night shifts alone at the embassy. I can handle it." "That's not what I mean," she replied. "Do you know why my gallery permanently displays my sister's work?" "To honor her memory," I said. "I saw a news clip a few years ago about her being institutionalized. Harper Andrews, right? I'm very sorry. Your family must have suffered a great deal." "Not as much as Harper herself suffered," Ms. Andrews responded. "Her art tells the story of her decline, not a sickness of the mind, but a sickness of the soul. She confronted something and imprisoned it within these paintings to protect humanity." Listening to her, I thought Amy also seemed unwell, not much better than her sister. But I would soon learn that it wasn't a delusion. Every night on the job was terrifying, but none compared to the first night. And I'll never forget Ms. Andrews' parting words as she walked out the door. "At night, the paintings must be carefully watched. If left unobserved for long periods, they can. Well, just make sure you always keep an eye on them." Night at the museum, huh? I thought to myself, trying to suppress a chuckle. No, it was far worse than the movies. The first hour of my shift passed suspiciously quietly. Under the cold blue light of the security system, a chilling painting stared at me from the far wall. It depicted a man as thin as a stick figure with terrifyingly long limbs and blank white eyes that seemed to follow me, as all monstrous eyes in paintings often do. As I walked around the gallery, adhering to Ms. Andrews' strict instructions to observe the paintings regularly, I approached closer to get a better look at the white-eyed man. I shivered at his bony jaw, which hung unusually low. He wore black trousers, but his gaunt upper body was bare, and he deviated from human form to the extreme. I paused to read the plaque beneath the painting, "The Tormentor. He craves torture. He yearns for freedom. He will devour humanity." I hurried past the painting, quite sure no one would even dream of stealing such a horrific piece. No need for excessive guarding. But the gallery didn't get any cheerier as I continued my rounds. They were incredibly frightening. I should have looked at the paintings more closely before applying for the job. Another painting depicted a little girl, no more than 10 years old, in a bright red pinafore with braided brown hair and a face. Empty, not figuratively, truly empty. Instead of eyes, nose, and mouth, there was only skin. The taut, flat skin was rendered with smooth brushstrokes, revealing Harper's clear intention. The artist had not accidentally blurred the face. She had deliberately left the girl without any features. Harper's childhood dies. As we grow, we come alive, we sin. They know it. They know everything. There were countless other paintings of horrific scenes. Apocalyptic wasteland cities, endless hellscapes of melting flesh. And those were the lucky ones who died quickly. The survivors in the apocalyptic paintings were tortured in gruesome, bloody ways by inhuman monsters, just like the one in the first painting. I usually have a pretty strong stomach, but there was something about these paintings that terrified me beyond endurance. The apocalyptic works seemed too real. Looking at them, I felt like I could hear the screams of the last humans on Earth, feel the heat of the flames on my skin, see the tormentors move. And then there was a painting of the gallery itself. The plaque read, "The prison, they infiltrated our world, so I locked them in here." Feeling sufficiently horrified, I retreated to the sofa near the entrance and slumped down. I worked during the day. The night shift was just a way to earn extra income. The exhaustion of a long day finally caught up with me. Only when I sat down did drowsiness weigh on me like a wall. My eyelids drooped until a noise startled me awake. An hour later, I stretched, saw a notification on my phone, and chuckled with relief. I opened a message from Kara, my wife, happy to have something to distract me from this lonely, silent night shift. But it was a strange message. "Honey, I told Mom about your new job. She said you should find something else." Apparently, there are always night shift openings on Facebook, and Mom's friend's husband had a mental breakdown after just one shift. He won't talk to anyone about what happened. There was another noise, but not the vibration of the phone. It was a muffled voice. My head snapped up just in time to see a shadowy figure disappear behind a gallery wall. I tried to suppress a scream, but lost my composure and froze. I considered running out of the gallery, but something stopped me, and it wasn't the prospect of being fired. It was the apocalyptic paintings. I got up, shining my phone's flashlight across the dimly lit gallery floor. The muffled sound repeated, haunting me. The ghostly moan of some emotion I couldn't identify, but I knew it terrified me, and as I rounded the corner, I came face to face with something utterly inexplicable. The little girl from the Childhood of Harper Dies painting. A younger version of Harper, I supposed. I trembled in place as the girl took heavy steps towards me on weak, almost skeletal legs. She continued to whimper, seemingly speaking something beneath the skin that covered her face. "I don't understand what you're saying," I whispered in horror as the ghostly girl stopped a step away from me. I found myself leaning forward, compelled by a force beyond my control. And then the most terrifying thing happened. My cheek turned to the side, allowing my ear to sink through the illusory skin on the girl's face. I screamed silently, horrified that I couldn't move my body or make a sound. Then, with my ear beneath the skin on Harper's dreadful, featureless face, I finally heard the words she repeated in a distorted, ghostly voice. "Why do you close your eyes?" the deformed phantom asked in a twisted, weeping voice. My body was suddenly thrown to the floor, and the girl vanished into the darkness. My eyes darted to the far wall, and my gut reached a deeper level of fear. He was gone. The tormentor was now just a blank canvas. The horrific monster had escaped the painting. Harper's invisible voice whispered in my ear, startling me. "Find him, he's hiding." I looked up at the ghostly girl's painting. Harper was back in the frame, but in a different pose. Her index finger pointed towards the gallery painting. I cried out in terror as I saw what the girl had realized. Behind one of the painted windows on the building's empty upper floor, the inhuman man stood, watching me. With trembling legs, I walked across the gallery to the stairs in the back corner. They led to a forbidden floor. Ms. Andrews had made that clear, but she had also made it clear that I must always keep an eye on the artworks, and I had failed. I truly had no other choice. Trembling, I crept up the creaking wooden stairs to a floor filled with unframed paintings. The frames were covered with white cloths, the vast room illuminated only by moonlight filtering through murky, open panes. I saw something truly terrifying. The tormentor. He was ceiling high, and his colossal form was bending over an uncovered painting. As I approached, I saw what had attracted the horrific monster. It was one of Harper's apocalyptic paintings, depicting a world engulfed in flames, and the tormentor was dissolving his bare, withered arm into the canvas, just as young Harper had submerged my ear through her flesh. However, as I approached the monster, shining my flashlight on him, his flesh began to sizzle, and he let out a disgusting hiss. At first, I thought the light was hurting him, but then I realized he had become aware of the watchful eyes of the guard observing him. I finally understood the power of watching. I knew why I was here. "Drive him back," Harper's voice whispered. "How?" I cried out. The man turned, and I screamed as I saw his horrifying blank white eyes. They were even more terrifying seen directly, and he was much larger than in the painting. The monster lunged at me, wrapping his bony hands around my neck, suffocating the light in my soul. I slipped into darkness, and the tormentor roared in my face. The roar sounded like a train whistle. "Tell him to go back to his cell," Harper's raspy voice instructed, "that you won't stop looking at him until he obeys you." I gasped, seeing flickering images in the tormentor's blank eyes. Prophecies of terrible destruction, fiery visions of humanity's end at the hands of this dreadful phantom and his demonic army. He meant to scare me, but the thought of such a horrific future only spurred me to open my eyes. "I won't stop," I said, gasping for breath, "until you stop." The inhuman flesh sizzled under the weight of my gaze. The tormentor screamed in rage, but I thought the world might already be over. If I passed out, I would leave the demon unguarded and free to wreak havoc on humanity. But in a fortunate twist of fate, it released my neck, and I fell to the ground. Perhaps it too was close to death. I crawled down the stairs, and the paintings were full of color again. Everything was back in place. And the strangest thing was that I didn't give up. I didn't call in sick. When Ms. Andrews arrived at the gallery at 6:00 a.m., she seemed mentally prepared to witness another traumatized guard quit. But I didn't quit. I couldn't. Not after seeing the tormentor's apocalyptic desires. Too much was at stake. Each canvas was a supernatural prison. The artist, Harper Andrews, had even locked a horrific, childhood version of herself in a portrait as a protective measure. The featureless child wasn't even the worst thing here. There were paintings of humanity's apocalypse, hellfire, the end of days. And then there was the painting of the tormentor. An inhuman man as tall as a tree with pitiable blank white eyes and a jaw that extended past his shoulders. He and his deformed minions were imprisoned in the gallery's exhibits, and they craved freedom. They craved to torture humanity eternally in unimaginable ways. They plotted a fate worse than death. I've told you about my first shift, but I'm sure you don't think I went 2 years without further incident. One evening 4 months ago, a text conversation with my wife took a horrifying turn. "Kara, you can quit your day job. You're earning enough from the gallery now. I just want to spend more time with you. I love you." Kara then grew a little suspicious. "You're away from home so much. Do you have another woman? Amy is pretty too." If I squinted a little, the chances of me having an affair with one of Harper's demons were higher. "Oh, that reminds me. I just bought a painting I couldn't resist." Damn it, I should have told my wife about the job. I should have told her about the horrific nature of the things I guarded. She would never have bought that artwork if she knew it was more than just paint on canvas. After reading the message, I quickly called. "Please tell me you're joking," I said, trembling. "What's wrong, Frank? Your voice sounds strange," Kara replied. "Why would you buy one of those paintings?" I asked. "What? You know I like creepy stuff," she giggled. "Don't be childish. You stare at those paintings all night. What's wrong with hanging one in our living room? I don't even understand why Amy sells her sister's work," I said. "I spoke with her privately after you gave me a tour of the gallery. I really can't believe it took you over a year to show me. The paintings are beautiful, scary, but beautiful. Harper Andrews was incredibly talented. What happened to her is so sad," Kara sighed. "I just made an offer and Amy accepted," I asked. "She said she wasn't very attached to it. She said it wasn't one of the paintings that needed to be stared at. It sounded rude because I thought it was as great as her sister's other works. But," Kara began, "I have to go." I interrupted her, hanging up. There was still an hour left until my night shift, but I arrived early. Amy Andrews was engrossed in conversation with a few last guests of the day, but I quickly pulled her aside, my anger simmering. "Why did you sell one of the paintings to Kara?" I asked. Ms. Andrews responded in an unnervingly flat tone. "My family is wealthy, Mr. Hall, but not that wealthy. I have limited income, and I have to keep the gallery running. Of course, I make money from memberships and fundraising events, but I also try to sell paintings." "But Harper, you know they need to be watched at all times," I protested. "Not all of them," she said. At that moment, I realized which painting was missing from the exhibition. There was an empty space on the wall above the plaque that read, "Childhood of Harper Dies." "What have you done?" I gasped. "My sister's self-portrait, though unsettling, isn't meant to harm us, Mr. Hall. It's not the kind that needs to be watched, and your wife paid very handsomely," Ms. Andrews shrugged. I grabbed the owner's arm in a moment of madness that could cost me my job and, as far as I knew, the future of humanity. On the first night, little Harper was the entity that watched me, I growled angrily. Your sister painted herself for a reason. Everything in this gallery has a purpose. Don't you understand? For a moment, I was sure something flickered in Amy Andrews' eyes. Something dark, and the corners of her lips twitched as if to reveal that she knew exactly what she had done. But her mouth quickly returned to normal. I pay you to watch the exhibits, she said. You shouldn't need anyone or anything to watch you. What the hell, I spat. I'm going home and I'm bringing that painting back. Ms. Andrews huffed, glancing at her watch. You have 55 minutes until your shift starts. I suggest you hurry. I drove home, my mind reeling with Ms. Andrews' twisted smile. Was she deliberately trying to sabotage the gallery by selling the painting? I wondered. Don't be stupid. If she were that evil, she could simply leave the paintings unguarded, unleashing the tormentor on the world. I tried to calm my pounding heart as I entered my street. After hastily parking, I didn't even close the car door. I ran into the dark house, yelling at the top of my lungs, Kara, where are you? From the living room, she yelled back, why are you shouting? I rushed into the room and my chest lightened a little. There were no signs of destruction, only my wife sitting on the sofa in the brightly lit room. Childhood of Harper dies, hung on the wall, but the ghostly figure of the girl remained within the canvas. Thank God, I sighed with relief. What's your problem with this creepy little girl? Kara asked, laughing. I just told you to bring it back. Kara, I'll make sure Ms. Andrews gives you a refund. My wife stood up and walked to the painting, stroking Harper's featureless face. I shivered in horror, waiting for the ghost to leap out of the frame. I assumed the girl wouldn't harm us, but I wasn't sure about anything. Come here and stroke her, my wife teased. She doesn't bite. I looked at my phone. My shift started in half an hour. Ms. Andrews hadn't made it clear what would happen if I wasn't on time. I feared she might do something worse than fire me. She might leave the paintings unguarded. I'll get you another painting, I said. Something spooky from another gallery. Anything but Harper Andrews' work, please. Would you be happier if I drew a smiley face on her? Kara asked. My wife dipped her finger into a glass of water, and I cried out in agony as she drew a pair of crude dots and a thin, pencil-like smile on Harper's featureless face. Kara frowned at my gaping mouth when she finished. Relax, we own it, she said. Besides, it'll dry, don't worry. I walked over and gripped her hand. Kara, I said gently, I'm begging you. She frowned. Damn it, I know that look, Frank, you're really scared. Why, just tell me and I'll let you take the painting back. You saw ghosts when you were a kid, didn't you? I asked. Kara nodded. My dad's dad. Right after the car accident, hard to believe, but I saw it. And I know you believe, too. You said you saw your grandmother's ghost, right? I squeezed her hand and nodded. Yes, so we believe in the spiritual. Well, this painting, all of Harper's paintings, are portals to something not of this world, and that's why I guard them. I'm sorry it took me so long to tell you. My wife bowed her head, shaking it. You talk in your sleep, you know? You've been having nightmares for months, talking about an entity and the apocalypse. I knew something was wrong with you. The light suddenly went out, and a gust of wind, like a hissing voice, filled the room. Kara screamed and leaped into my arms. I shivered, holding her tight to my chest so she couldn't see what I saw. Childhood of Harper dies. The water droplets on Harper's featureless face glowed faintly in the darkness, a weak white light. And the most terrifying thing was that the water droplets forming the smile had incomprehensibly transformed into a sorrowful expression. Can I take it? I whispered to Kara. She nodded, her face buried deep in my chest, so I led her to the bedroom and told her to close the door. I checked my phone, 20 minutes until my shift. I ripped the painting from the wall, ran out of the house, and sped into the car. When I arrived at the art gallery, the lights were out and Amy's car was gone. Fortunately, I was on time for my shift, but I didn't know how long she had left the place unattended. I rushed inside and immediately hung Childhood of Harper Dies back in its place. The gallery was whole again. I looked at the tormentor's painting. I was relieved to see the monster still locked away. But something was still wrong. There was a deep, hollow pit in my stomach. You're not in the art gallery, Harper's entity whispered in a distorted voice. I finally understood what she meant. The colors around me began to swirl. The gallery walls, the floor, the paintings, and even my hands looked murky. The world was made of paint. I was made of paint. And as I looked out, I saw the towering edges of the painting frame. I was trapped in the prison, Harper's painting of the art gallery. And I knew I was trapped in the painting because I could see the real world beyond the canvas. My memory flooded back. When I entered the real gallery, the tormentor had tricked me. He stood in his painting and everything seemed fine. I looked into those terrible white eyes, and that's when his mouth opened to swallow me. I screamed into the hellish void. Never had I felt such terror, not even on my first night at the gallery. I felt as if I had died, worse than death. I thought I had gone to hell. I thought I had failed my job, and Judgment Day had come. I thought of so many disgusting possibilities as the tormentor's dark void consumed me. Struggling inside his shadowy body, I was carried across the gallery floor by the inhuman man, and he violently spat me into the canvas of the prison. I had forgotten. He made me forget that I had left the real world. "It's finding a way out," Harper's raspy voice said. "Me too," I cried. I looked at Harper's painting, and the girl wasn't there anymore. Instead, there was a door with a flickering blue "exit" sign above it. I felt the brushstrokes of the painted world stretch and constrict. The canvas was crushing me. I didn't belong here. My painted form tightened, and I lunged towards the door Harper had created, afraid of what might happen if I stayed in that false world another second. As my hand touched the painted canvas within the painted canvas, my body liquefied and merged into the canvas exit. A silent, serene black enveloped me. And then I found myself on the tiled floor, the real asterisk tiled floor, gasping. Back in reality, I looked around the gallery, and my eyes met a horrifying sight. The contents of every painting had spilled out onto the floor. The tormentor stood proudly amidst his minions, whispering sharp conspiracies. I had expected a loud roar from the apocalyptic demons, but something about the almost silent conspiracy was even more terrifying. However, from a distance, I still heard human screams. The apocalyptic sound of humanity being tortured in an endless eternity. The cries of pain were almost melodic in a terribly dissonant way. A chorus of screams, humanity's horrifying final song. Suddenly, in inhuman synchronicity, the tormentor's minions, smaller versions of him but no less terrifying, turned their heads to look at me as if their brittle neck bones had fossilized. I screamed at their inverted faces, hanging from their bare backs. They had white eyes and drooping jaws, staring at me from the middle of the room. They gasped as their flesh sizzled under the weight of my gaze. "Go back to your paintings," I cried weakly. There was nothing commanding in my voice. Pure terror fueled it. And the tormentor could see it. His eyes pierced mine like on the first night. In them, I saw nothingness, the absence of everything, and I mean the end of all, the end of humans, the end of ends. He sought to fill me with unimaginable fear, and he succeeded, but it was the same fatal mistake he had made on the first night. I thought of Kara, my parents, my friends, everyone I loved. That's what fueled me as my eyes ached under the pressure of staring at those abominations. Ghostly voices chirped that I must close my eyes or die. I didn't fall for the entity's cruel scheme. I clenched my fists, armed only with my eyes and pure will. The minions retreated first, their flesh scorched. They backed away, dragging their inverted heads and deformed limbs with them, returning to the painted inferno. And it would forever remain just a dream, I told myself. But the tormentor was still there, his mouth wide open, dropping past his shoulders. His flesh was scorched, smoke rising from his bare upper body and torn lower garments. In a final burst of rage, he strode powerfully towards me and extended a gaunt arm. I grabbed his wrist before his rough, disgusting fingers could wrap around my neck, and the pain was inexplicable. It was a deep burning of the mind, not the body. The tormentor's last attempt to paralyze the guard standing between him and the apocalypse. I saw her sitting in our living room, smiling at something on the wall. I could only watch in utter horror as her flesh melted before my eyes. Horribly, she continued to smile, even as she turned into smoldering flesh and blood on the sofa. The tormentor showed me what she saw. On the wall hung a painting of our house, burning to ashes amidst the complete destruction of humanity. In the streets, the tormentor's minions inflicted unspeakable horrors on humanity. A demon disemboweled a woman with a bone fragment protruding from her own severed limbs. That was the only scene I could write down. The rest was too horrific. Wait, it wasn't real. It was another trick. Kara wouldn't smile at such horror. My eyes ached under the immense strain of looking at that unholy phantom, but the tormentor gave in first. Unable to bear my watchful gaze, he struggled free of my grasp, taking what seemed like agonizing steps back to the canvas. And as he returned to the frame, the chorus of screams stopped. The gallery was silent and still. I spent the rest of my shift standing in that exact spot, staring at the paintings before me. I didn't speak, and I didn't move. Before leaving the building at the end of my shift, I quickly glanced back at the prison. The painting that had trapped me. Existential dread gripped my heart, and 4 months later, it still hasn't let go. I can't stop thinking about what it felt like to be inside that canvas. How do I know I'm in the real world? What if the apocalypse has already happened? I could be living in a painting right now. Harper Andrews, the woman who could provide answers to all my questions. Yesterday afternoon, I visited her at the local mental institution. "I know why you're here," Harper said. The slender woman in pristine white attire, her smooth brown hair neatly braided in the afternoon sun, sent shivers down my spine. She looked exactly like the Childhood of Harper Dies painting. That was terrifying, considering she was decades older than the version she had painted of herself. "The paintings, finally," I replied. Harper smiled, gesturing to the chair opposite her in the deserted cafeteria. I nodded awkwardly and slumped into the hard plastic chair across the table. An orderly stood at the cafeteria door, keeping an eye on us. "2 years on the job, isn't it?" Harper asked. "I thought you'd have had the courage to visit me long ago." "If this is just about the tormentor." I flinched at the name and quickly glanced at the orderly, just to make sure he was only 6 feet tall. For a fleeting moment, I thought the nightmare man from the painting was hunched at the door, watching me. "I don't blame you," Harper continued. "I just want to save time. My sister isn't evil. In fact, she's kind. And perhaps a part of her is still there, but it's not the part in control. She longs to unleash the tormentor and the others." I paused for a long moment, staring into the dejected eyes of the woman across from me. She looked sharp, focused, healthy, completely unlike what I had expected. "Why? Why wouldn't you? If Amy?" I stammered. Harper sighed, reading my thoughts. "Yes, I suppose killing her would end everything, wouldn't it? However, deep down, she's still my sister. I'm sorry. And why, you might ask, hasn't she released the creatures from their painted prison? That last question is the one that truly needs to be answered, I think." "I do," I said. Harper nodded. "Do you have your phone?" "Yes," I replied. "Why?" "Record my story," she said. "I need you to document the knowledge I'm about to impart to you. No one has ever believed me, but you will. You've seen what's at stake." This is a record from 2003. I was 8 years old and Amy was in her 20s. My birth was certainly a disruption. Mom was a full-time lawyer and Dad was a historian. They thought their child-rearing days were long over. "Mom, did I ruin your life?" I once asked. "You're the most wonderful surprise life has ever brought your parents," Mom promised, and we giggled. Dad loved us, but he spent too much time abroad. He wasn't as busy or successful when he was younger, so I think he worried he had been a better father to Amy. One fateful day, he sought to rectify that. "Machu Picchu," he said. "Let's go." "What's Pikachu, Dad?" I asked. Dad laughed. "Machu Picchu, it's the lost city. I think you'll like it. You can draw it. Your talent is wasted on the dull scenery around here." I didn't think I'd like ancient ruins, but I couldn't pass up the chance to spend time with Dad. And he seemed very excited about the place. It was beautiful. My 8-year-old brain wasn't so young as to miss that, and after hours of watching Dad excavate what he called a point of interest, the man finally began to dance with excitement. I stopped drawing to see what had captivated him. The fruit of his labor was a large stone slab, covered in terrible carvings of repulsive creatures. Dad began to babble excitedly about the importance of the discovery. He had spent a decade connecting the dots between the mysterious disappearances of advanced civilizations. There were signs of a destructive force, a plague greater than anything on Earth. He said there were entities that sought to destroy humanity, and though their origin remained a mystery, they were certainly not bound by the laws of physics. And Dad had discovered detailed writings about successful rituals to imprison these repulsive creatures. He said salvation always came from imprisoning the entities, but they couldn't be killed, and they would always seek freedom. That's what scared me. They would always seek freedom, and Dad was holding their prison in his own hands. He had unearthed something that should have been left undisturbed. When we returned to England, I snuck into Dad's study and found the translated texts. I had a bad feeling about the stone slab he brought home, so I studied the ritual that could imprison entities. It involved detailed drawings and a guardian. But who guarded the drawings when they were buried underground in Machu Picchu? No one. Dad's research seemed to indicate that the Inca artists in Machu Picchu had discovered a new ritual. Something that allowed the Incas to trap demons more successfully than their predecessors. If Dad had just left it alone, Mr. Frank Hall, you would still be living a normal life. None of us would be in this situation. Everything quickly went downhill. My parents started arguing about that stone slab. Dad obsessively stared at it until the early hours of the morning. He said it spoke to him. When Mom couldn't take it anymore, she left. Amy and I were bewildered, and we hated Dad. That's when my sister did something stupid. She destroyed the stone slab with a sledgehammer. Everything quickly collapsed. The tormentor and his deformed creatures gradually emerged from the broken slab, and I fled the room. That was the moment I feared, the prophecy that had given me nightmares. I locked myself in my room and opened the paintings I had finished in preparation weeks before. However, to imprison the freed demons in a new painting required a ritual. Like many artists before me, I pulled out a tooth. My gums bleeding and tears of pain, I began to trembling carve my name into each painting with my baby tooth. And the most terrifying thing happened. Black masses began to crawl under my bedroom door. The creatures were reluctantly clinging to their painted forms. They were trapped in their new prison. The house was unusually quiet. I snuck out of my bedroom and called my family. When I entered the living room, I shivered. The demons were gone, but Dad was sitting in the rocking chair. His eyes were blank, and he smiled. It was an evil smile, something beyond your darkest imagination. Blood seeped through the scratch marks on his shirt. He had clawed at his own flesh. He was still alive, but didn't move or speak. He just grinned. Amy, meanwhile, was curled up on the sofa in a fetal position, sobbing. And when the police arrived, they discovered something disturbing. Mom had never left. Her body was found in the shed, decomposed for weeks. I never saw the scene, but I clearly remember a paramedic vomiting on the lawn. Dad went to prison, and Amy became my guardian. I explained everything to her, but she didn't believe me. So I guarded the paintings daily, and years later, I used my inheritance to open the art gallery. I thought the burden would be lighter if there were other eyes watching the paintings. Amy helped run the place. She had various sources of income, so she didn't mind that the gallery was a bit expensive. However, one day she changed. She came home from the gallery with empty eyes that reminded me of Dad's. She said she finally believed my story. She had seen the tormentor step out of a painting. I couldn't always be at the gallery, but Amy promised never to leave the paintings unattended. She admitted to going out for food before locking up for the evening. If she hadn't returned in time, I suppose you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. The world would be over by now. My sister, anyway, changed in the years that followed. She became cold and distant. I started seeing darkness in her eyes, and she spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. I became so afraid of her and her malevolent smile that I had a mental breakdown. And she put me in this institution 4 years ago. I suppose the tormentor thought that with me out of the way, he could manipulate her into freeing him from the painting. All she had to do was make sure no one looked at him. But why hasn't everything collapsed? Why does she hire guards to watch? Well, she still plays by my rules because I have something the tormentor needs. If he wanted to, that terrifying creature would have urged my sister to kill me, just as he urged Dad to kill Mom. But he needs the tooth I used in the ritual. The tormentor always uses slaves to achieve his goals. He infiltrates human minds. At his command, I'm sure Dad destroyed any Inca tools used to carve the drawings on the slab. So, even if Amy closes her eyes, or better yet, destroys the paintings, it wouldn't be enough to free the entities. It sounds like guarding them is unnecessary, doesn't it? As long as I keep the tooth hidden, you could quit your guard duty and call it a day. There's no way the tormentor can fulfill his destiny, right? The problem is an unguarded tormentor, while unable to end the world, becomes freer with each passing moment. Free enough to seek out the tooth without Amy's help, perhaps, and infiltrate my mind to find its location. As long as someone is watching, they remain in the paintings. Their true power lies in their servants, my father and now Amy. She visits me regularly and she only wants one thing from me, the tooth, but I still hold the power. She follows my word, or else I've threatened to end everything. The secret dies with me. The tormentor uses her to exhaust me, but I'm stronger than it thinks. And that's all, Frank Hall. The rest is a mystery even to me. I stopped the recording then and exhaled deeply. There was too much information to digest. Amy is trying to sabotage everything, I explained. She let Childhood of Harper Dies out of the gallery. Harper sighed, perhaps it's time. No, I don't mean that, I said firm. Harper's eyes welled with tears. I'm tired, Frank. I'm so very tired. I'm just one person. You're not alone, I said. I'll guard. She sniffled. And what happens when you reach your breaking point? Perhaps this is bigger than us. Perhaps we need to tell someone. I scoffed. Who? The government? Do you think that would be a good idea? Giving the tormentor hundreds of minds to infiltrate. It's dangerous to have your paintings publicly displayed. You and I won't live forever to fight, Harper pointed out. So we'll keep finding successors, or maybe we'll figure out how the Inca artist really sealed these monsters away, I said. He found a way to permanently dispose of them. No guard needed. Harper sighed. I suppose there's one more thing you should know. What? I asked. The tooth, she said. It's in the house. Whoa, stop, I yelled. What are you doing? The secret dies with you, remember. Yes, but Amy will never stop looking, so you need to keep her away from the basement. Please, I pleaded. I don't know why you're telling me this. I'm just scared. I have a bad feeling. I looked up and saw that the orderly had left, and that's when worry gripped my gut. The sun seemed to dim, and an emptiness filled the room. I know it sounds contradictory, but I'm sure Harper felt it too. Her eyes widened. Frank, Harper swallowed hard, is there a Red Range Rover in the parking lot? My legs trembling, I crept to the cafeteria window and squinted. A heavy gray cloud hung above. The blue sky was beyond this solitary omen. There seemed to be no other guests. Beside my white Mitsubishi, there was only a crimson Red Range Rover. I screamed in horror. Frank, Harper began. You need to, a shattering sound echoed through the cafeteria, and I turned to see something chilling to the bone. Ms. Harper was bent backward, her head hanging upside down over the back of the chair. Like the dreadful tormentors in the art gallery months ago. At the cafeteria door was a figure too tall for the frame. I yelled, squinting, but it was Amy. She looked normal height, but I knew what I had seen for a fleeting moment. I chased her out of the building, my heart pounding, preparing to face a similar fate. But the tormentor spared me. He had other plans. Moreover, Amy was quick. I was no threat. She had driven off before I could reach her. That was 3 hours ago. I knew where she was going. The good news was that their family home was in Ireland, so it would take Amy some time to get there. The bad news was that it would take me some time to get there too. I was waiting for my flight. Tomorrow, the world might end. Cherish your loved ones. I arrived in Ireland after a short flight, but it was too late. The dilapidated house held secrets. Despite being armed with Harper's knowledge, the crude building still threatened and confused me. The horror stemmed from more than just the vines crawling up the walls or the haunted house's graffiti interior. It was the unearthly aura of the place. The lingering evil from the horrors that unfolded 20 years ago. Why did Harper have to tell me where she hid the tooth? My hypothesis was that the tormentor had infiltrated her mind. Perhaps he had finally succeeded in tricking her. I blamed myself. Harper had been careful for years. She lowered her guard around me, momentarily distracted. And that was all the tormentor needed. As soon as Harper was no longer useful, she was butchered. I could still see her disjointed neck hanging over the hard back of the cafeteria's plastic chair. The basement was a dark, unlit cavern smelling of damp. I illuminated the cobweb-filled room with my phone, and something made me scream in horror. Amy. She was kneeling, trembling in the middle of the room. She didn't even shield her eyes from my light. She just stared at my face with a blank, tear-filled expression. And I realized the horrific truth. The tormentor was gone. I no longer saw the darkness in her eyes, and if the creature didn't need a servant, that could only mean one terrible thing. The apocalypse was near. A bottle of hydrochloric acid confirmed it. It lay next to a hole in the wooden floorboards. Amy had destroyed Harper's tooth, the only thing that gave our eyes the power to imprison the terrifying entities in their painted cells. My family is dead. Amy sobbed as if she had been in a trance for years. And only then, decades later, could she process the horror of what had happened to her loved ones. Don't worry, I said. Soon everyone will die. The woman wept and I wanted to empathize, but I kept seeing her sister's neck, the very neck Amy had brutally snapped hours before. It was hard to trust her. How long ago? I asked, pointing to the acid-burned hole in the floor. I destroyed it just before you arrived. Within an hour, probably, Amy replied distractedly. I nodded. How long do you think we have before the world ends? She shrugged. When I freed them as a child, it took time for them to crawl out of the slab. They began building legions of creatures from the very dust in our house. Harper must have been upstairs for hours, and the world didn't end. They were busy torturing Dad and me, but I don't want to talk about that. I effectively blocked that trauma from my mind so much that I didn't believe Harper's story for years. Whatever, I sighed. Let's enjoy Earth's final hours before hell breaks loose. Listen, I read Dad's texts, Amy sniffled. The ones left in this ransacked house. If we hurry, we can. Perhaps it's over, I said coldly. Amy's eyes sharpened and her eyebrows furrowed as she locked her gaze on me. But it wasn't the evil I had seen in her eyes, not the tormentor. No, it was determination, the desperate, fading determination of a human being. So that's it. What about Kara? She asked. You're just going to let everything end? What can we do? As we speak, horrors are crawling out of paintings. It won't be long before they devastate humanity. And we're not artists, so I doubt we can paint. I paused, seized by an inspiring idea. The covered paintings on the upper floor of the gallery, exact replicas of the ones downstairs, I whispered. Amy nodded, understanding my meaning. Yes, Harper's backups for failure, she had once said. The name-carving ritual has to be done by the original artist, doesn't it? I asked. Amy shrugged. The texts only specify that the person using the tool sacrifices their tooth, binding the apocalyptic creatures to the painted image. So if I carve my name into each of Harper's backup paintings, I mused, gently tapping a tooth, but then I sighed. We're miles away, thousands of people will die by the time we get to the gallery. Amy's eyes widened. You know, there are other ancient rituals our father detailed in the translated texts. The Maya, Inca, and other ancient cultures learned things modern humans have forgotten. When their cities fell, the survivors used centuries of spiritual teachings to lock away the tormentor and his legions in prisons. But they also used the power of art for other things. What ritual could save us? I asked. A painting of the gallery, she replied. A door to the real gallery. My blood ran cold. I immediately recalled the terrifying experience in the prison, trapped in a painting I truly believed was reality. Harper had freed me from that hellish place with an escape door. I swore to myself I would stay firmly in the real world for the rest of my life. But Amy was suggesting I voluntarily step back into that existential hell. And how do I know I'm back in the real world? I asked. This won't be like any other painting. It will be a portal, not a prison. You can feel the difference between painted color and real color. Trust me, she said. Even when you were in the prison, a part of you always knew something was wrong. Can you deny that? Amy was right. A painted lie could never convince a person forever. But how could I be sure? And then I considered the alternative, the complete extinction of humanity. But we're back to square one, I pointed out. We need a painting of the art gallery to act as a portal. Do you know how to paint? Can you create a painting that looks like the art gallery on canvas? I certainly couldn't. I think you underestimate how many paintings my sister created when she was young, Amy said, smiling. She led me out of the basement, her legs trembling, continuing to explain. We moved to England because Harper couldn't stand this place anymore, but we also moved because I had business connections in your country. Anyway, I found the perfect location for my teenage sister's art gallery. Amy continued the story as we climbed the creaking stairs. So what's the first thing my sister did when I showed her the property? She painted the new prison for the horror paintings. She said bringing a place into the ritual would empower it. Of course, at the time, I didn't believe her crazy ramblings. I had convinced myself that no supernatural horrors had actually occurred on the night Dad had his breakdown. Anyway, Harper left that painting in this house along with many others. She said she'd paint a better one at some point. Do you think it's similar enough to the art gallery to act as a teleportation device? Amy swallowed hard. I really hope so. I don't want you to be stuck in a painted realm that doesn't exist. A half-human, half-paint, crumbling thing. Thanks, I said. Great motivational speech. Really makes me want to do this. Amy opened Harper's bedroom door and replied practically, "You don't have a choice, do you? Unless you want me to." I shook my head. Inside Harper's old bedroom, a stack of unfinished paintings lay on the forgotten, dusty blanket. Amy and I rummaged through the pile, finally finding Harper's initial attempt at creating the prison. Apparently, before moving to England and transforming the property into an art gallery, Harper's grand vision was a teenage fantasy. Fortunately, her painted vision wasn't too far from what the art gallery had become. "I wanted to do something for her," Amy explained sadly, hugging the tear-stained painting. "After our parents died, Harper was never the same. I thought a place for her art would help her heal, even though the paintings terrified me. I don't want to talk about Harper. The horror is too fresh, too raw." "How do we turn a prison into a portal?" I asked. "Sacrifice," Amy replied quietly. "Always sacrifice." "Sew another tooth?" I asked. "To bend the fabric of space, the Maya bent the mind. That's what my father wrote," Amy said. "Hand me a bottle of Jack Daniels." I laughed. "Are you kidding me? I need to drink to save the world." "To go somewhere else, you have to loosen your connection to your current position in space and time," Amy replied with a serious expression. "I suppose stronger drugs might work, but this is all I have. A bottle of Jack. I was going to drink myself to death anyway." I downed most of the liquid, ignoring the burning sensation and the urge to vomit. "Touch the canvas," Amy instructed, "and repeat these words after me, trying to pronounce each syllable clearly." I placed my hand on the painting. Ms. Andrews began speaking in an ancient language, and I followed. After a few minutes, the alcohol began to affect my system, and I had to concentrate extremely hard. I didn't want to slur a single letter. The colors of the painting began to swirl, and then the terrifying thing happened. My flesh began to melt. I screamed, truly believing Amy Andrews had tricked me. I watched myself liquefy, merging with the canvas, and my jaw dropped in horror. "It's working," Amy cried. "Good luck, Frank." "And you," I mumbled, slipping into the canvas. Amy smiled tearfully. "Every ritual requires sacrifice, Frank." The boundary between fiction and reality blurred. What remained of Harper's bedroom had transformed into a vortex of colors, but I saw Amy Andrews clearly. I saw painted blue tears rolling down her peach cheeks. I saw the knife she pulled from her pocket. The colors began to blend, but I knew what she had done. I tried to scream at the horrific sight, but my face consisted of melting, painted liquid. My limbs gradually deformed, and I felt nothing. The absence of sensation was the real horror. My vision blurred as the dazzling, swirling kaleidoscope seemed to swell and spiral. The painted art gallery magnified, filling the room, and my body became thick paint on the canvas. Then I fell to the dark floor of the real art gallery. No one had guarded the paintings for hours. Not that it mattered. After Harper's tooth was destroyed, our eyes were powerless against the tormentor and his legion. The ritual was broken. Determined to fix it, I pulled myself to my feet. The world wasn't over, there was still time, but the strange silence of the gallery terrified me, not as much as the first thing I noticed. Of course, the empty paintings. Every painting except "Childhood of Harper Dies" had been abandoned by the monsters I was supposed to guard. The little girl sat in the painting, her featureless head in her hands. She was sobbing, and I felt like doing the same. Her painted form was even more terrifying after the real Harper's insidious death. She mumbled, slipping her head out of her hands and motioning for me to come closer. As I did, she leaned out of the canvas. I placed my ear against her face, shivering as it slipped beneath the flesh. "They're destroying the paintings upstairs," she whispered, "but they won't find the apocalypse." Before I could ask what she meant, her canvas slipped from the frame and floated gently to the tiled floor. My jaw dropped when I saw the hidden painting on the back of "Childhood of Harper Dies." It depicted everything, every terrible entity, every apocalyptic scenario needed to keep the demons lost in their false paradise. Apparently, that hidden painting had always been Harper's true plan B, a more effective way to trap the creatures. Only one painting to guard, and only one name to carve. My heart pounded in my chest. I put my hand in my mouth, pinching a canine tooth with my thumb and forefinger. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and pulled with all my might. The pain was excruciating, but worse, I couldn't seem to free the slippery canine. I needed a tool to loosen the ritual tool. I ran to the reception desk and rummaged through drawers looking for scissors. Another deep breath. Then I started hitting the scissor blades against it. I'm sorry, I can't. It's just too horrible. I finally got the tooth out, blood gushing like a waterfall, my hand trembling. I triumphantly held the canine tooth up to eye level and began to laugh maniacally. I was drunk, and I'm sure that dulled the pain, but it still hurt like hell. Staggering drunk towards the apocalypse, lying on the ground, I finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and then the front door opened. "Frank," Kara cried. "Where did you go?" I turned, trembling, reaching out. "Kara, go home." My wife's eyes widened and she screamed at me. "Look out!" A heavy hand gripped my throat. Not a human hand. I already knew what had seized me. The waves of despair and existential dread were heavy, unmistakable. As the hand lifted me off the ground, it began to turn me to face it. There, inches from my suffocating face, was the tormentor's disgusting visage. His deep-set, blank white eyes pierced mine, but that wasn't what terrified me. His flesh wasn't sizzling under the weight of my gaze. No tooth, no ritual of imprisonment, no power. And his wide, drooping mouth suddenly closed as if the creature was no longer angry. Instead, the creature smiled. The most horrific smile imaginable. The smile I'm sure Amy and Harper had seen on their father's face. The grin of something that had finally found a way to end humanity. I wheezed, gasping for breath as the shirtless creature, twice the height of any human, choked me. I had never felt such complete panic. I stared into the face of boundless power, something older than time. Perhaps my peripheral vision began to dim, but I had no tricks left. My eyes could no longer imprison it. And then I heard screams. The tormentor released me, more concerned with the scene in the main reception area. I turned to look at my wife and I screamed. Harper's ghost seemed to have escaped the painting. The canvas still lay on the floor, displaying the apocalypse on its back, and I could only watch in helpless horror as the featureless girl merged with the body. The tormentor let out a train whistle shriek, and his minions suddenly seeped through cracks in the tile, worming their slender bodies into the room, transforming their flat forms into full limbs. I wondered where the cavalry had been hiding, and I suddenly saw why they were animated. Kara's head was inverted backward, and her body began to float. I screamed in horror, wondering why Harper had turned her back on me in my darkest hour. But then the incredible happened. "I see it now," she said, her eyes still inverted backward. The tormentors began to lurch towards my floating wife, and I watched in amazement as she threw them aside. The tormentor crept across the floor towards her, crushing the sharp shards of his minions underfoot. Kara and Harper couldn't kill those things, but they weren't trying to kill them. They were trying to buy me time. I collapsed to the floor, gasping and wheezing from the swollen neck the tormentor had given me. And when I reached the apocalypse, I opened my tightly clenched palm to reveal the bloody canine tooth. The writing tool in hand, I finally began to carve two important words: Frank H. The chorus of screams echoed again. The symphony of the dying, but not real, and that was good. It meant the tormentor was trying to infiltrate my mind. It meant the ritual was working. I looked up and saw the angry, gaping mouth on the 10-foot-tall phantom's face. His minions began to decompose, turning into black masses of paint, just as Harper had described. The creatures slipped into the apocalypse, imprisoned in a painting once more. The tormentor clung to our world for dear life, screaming under the weight of my watchful eyes. His flesh was a burning inferno, and he let out one last cry of pain before sliding into the apocalyptic painting. I ran to my wife, who lay on the floor in a daze. I just wanted to see your workplace again," she rasped. I cried, laughing with relief because my wife was okay. What the hell happened? "Kara, you came to save me." "No, I was possessed by a demon," Kara smiled. "It was still me in there. Harper showed me the way." "Honestly, I thought you'd learned your lesson last time you wandered in here," I said. Kara smiled weakly. "I had to save you." But the shocks of the evening didn't end with the re-imprisonment of the tormentor and the other demons. In the early hours of my shift, Amy Andrews walked through the door. I gasped, staring at the bandaged stump where her right arm used to be. I had misunderstood the severity of the sacrifice she had made, and I thought that news had saved my broken mind. I couldn't bear any more death. Amy's family had suffered enough. Amy had suffered enough, locked away from her own mind for 20 years. I planned to keep her away from the tormentor so he would never sink his claws into her again. We talked about the future of the art gallery, but only one painting truly mattered anymore. Only one painting remained completely intact, the apocalypse, and on its back, Childhood of Harper dies. But that was our little secret. Ms. Andrews said I could keep the job, and she had hired someone else to guard the place during the day. Someone we could trust. Someone who understood the importance of the art gallery. Kara. I wasn't happy about my wife joining, but no one could be shielded from the apocalypse. We couldn't risk it. Too much was at stake. I'm a night shift security guard at the art gallery, and I think I need a raise. So that's the end. Or rather, this is just a new chapter in the endless war between humanity and the dark forces that seek to destroy us. Frank Hall, Amy Andrews, Harper Andrews, and now Kara Hall, guardians in the shadows, watching a single painting that contains the apocalypse. You know what I think about most? Not the tormentor or the demons, but the sacrifice. Harper sacrificed her childhood and ultimately her life. Amy sacrificed her arm and 20 years of free will. Frank sacrificed his peace of mind. And all for what? So that we, the listeners, can sleep peacefully, unaware that hell is just a blink away. Frank chuckled, including a photo. He took a picture of the Andrews Gallery during the day. Empty, with only one painting hanging on the wall, a little girl with no face. But if you look very closely at the reflection on the floor, can you see them? The twisted shapes, the clawed hands, the blank white eyes. They're still there, waiting, watching, craving freedom, and only the eyes of a weary guard stand between us and the apocalypse. Thank you for listening to Frank Hall's story. I hope you remember that sometimes the real heroes don't wear capes or shields. They're just ordinary people sitting in the dark, staring into the nightmare so it doesn't stare back at us. This is Jeff, wishing you a dreamless sleep. And Frank, if you're listening, thank you, on behalf of all of us. Have you ever sat in a late-night diner and counted how many people are there? I have. After reading this email, the sender is named Ryan. He's locked himself in his bedroom at his parents' house. He doesn't dare go out because he knows something is waiting for him out there. Something that only other people can see. Jeff, that was the first thing Stella asked me as she sat down at the table. I looked around the 2:00 a.m. diner. It was almost empty. What do you mean? How many people are in here right now, besides us? She said. Probably 5 or 6, I replied. Stella's lips trembled. Exactly how many people are in the room? She was terrified. I counted, the waiter, the old man staring at a bowl of soup near the door, 2 young girls who had just come from a night out eating crepes, the guy in the baseball cap struggling with a long steak, and the middle-aged woman in a green pea coat. 6, I said. 6 people. Stella immediately relaxed. Thank you. Stella and I hadn't seen each other in 5 months. I was away at college and came home for the summer. Stella got into a good university, but her sister, Anne, died in a car accident 2 weeks before she enrolled. The death hit her hard. I don't know why she called me. Surely not to confide, and certainly not to hang out. Stella knew I abstained from everything. For me, that decision was the result of growing up with alcoholic, abusive parents and knowing genetics. Stella looked terrible, not high, but mentally exhausted. There were scars on her hands, mottled bruises on her arms, and some strange scars on her neck. 2 of them looked like clumsy, reversed ZS, like in a mirror. Stella's friend, Corey, had dropped her off at the diner about 30 minutes before I arrived. I didn't know him well, but what I did know, I didn't like. "How are you doing?" I asked. Stella didn't answer. The waiter appeared, and Stella looked at him carefully before ordering black coffee and a blueberry muffin. I ordered hot tea and fries, even though I wasn't very hungry. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a few minutes before Stella looked down at her hands and asked, "What's the worst thing you've ever done?" I shrugged. Lied to people. Lied to get out of things. Mostly with friends in high school, but I've changed. I don't do that anymore. Oh, I also stole once a pair of socks. Stella chuckled. Just then the waiter brought our drinks and food. Stella flinched, her eyes wide, her face flushed. Everyone in the diner turned to look but did nothing. "Are you okay?" the waiter asked, noticing her distress. Taking a deep breath, Stella sat down. "Yeah, sorry," she said. "It's just been a long night." The waiter shook his head, placing the items down. When he left, Stella sipped her coffee, then looked at me over the rim of the cup, her eyes teary. I did the worst thing I could do. I tried to kill someone. I wasn't sure I heard correctly. What? Stella nodded, her eyes locked on mine. A jogger. Corey and I hit him with the car. Oh my God, when? On the way here, my blood drained from my face. We should call the police. He might still be out there, injured and— "Don't bother," she interrupted. "We went back to check, there was no jogger." "What do you mean?" I started to lose my composure. "Don't play games with me," I said. "I don't want to hear this nonsense." "It's not nonsense," Stella replied. "Ask Corey." "I don't want to call Corey," Stella said. "I didn't actually see the jogger. Corey saw him, that's how I knew, so I asked exactly where the man was and I yanked the steering wheel. Corey screamed at me as I drove into him. He flew so far it was like it meant something. Corey slammed on the brakes. He was panicking, talking about going to jail and his life being over. But I told him not to worry. That drove him crazy. When he got out of the car to help the jogger, he froze because there was no one there. The road was empty, and me, I had guessed. She took another sip of coffee and poked her muffin with a fork, breaking through the crust and admiring the blue-stained tines under the flickering fluorescent lights. "It can look exactly like a person, any age, dressed in any way. It talks like a person, eats and does all the normal things people do. Doesn't sound very scary, I know. But wait for the twist. I can't see it. This thing that pretends to be human, it's invisible to me. But you and everyone else, you can see it." I didn't understand what she was saying, and I really didn't. Stella finally looked up at me. 2 weeks ago, we were tripping. Me and Corey and a woman named Genevieve. She was the guide. At Corey's house on the balcony. We were doing synthetic MDMA bombs. We were taking hallucinogens and trying to explore inner mental space, tripping together, sharing the same images. It's crazy that if you synchronize emotionally and mentally, you can travel together. I know how that sounds, I know. But it really worked for us. We guess you'd describe it as cosmic travel. We built this architecture, this city in our minds, and then explored it. Mostly beautiful moving buildings, structures reaching high like mountain ranges, and in this mental city, that's where we met it. The diner doorbell chimed as the 2 young girls eating crepes left. Stella watched them go, then turned back to me. "I don't need to explain, there are 4 people in here now," I said. She nodded, took another sip of coffee, then continued. "That night, we went deeper into the city than ever before. We came to a tower with a spiral staircase, all the way up to the top floor, and found a locked door." "You all saw the same thing," I interrupted, disbelieving the experience. "Yes." Stella's demeanor became tense, her restlessness gone. "We all saw it. Okay, so we came to this door. A metal door, dented but bulging from the inside as if someone was kicking it, trying to break it down. Genevieve, she was scared, told us not to open that door, to stay away from it. She said there was a traveler on the other side." "A traveler?" Genevieve called it that. She was the guide. She knew the kind of structures we were exploring. She had seen such doors and been warned about travelers. According to her, they are like us. Inner explorers, but not from our reality. From another reality, an evil reality. But long story short, I opened the door. "Why did you do that?" Stella stirred her coffee, lost in thought for a second. Meanwhile, a chef quietly emerged from the kitchen and sat at the counter. He flipped through a newspaper someone had left and glanced at me. He nodded, smiling faintly. I wondered if he made the fries I wasn't eating. After Corey and Genevieve drifted off, Stella continued, still staring at her drink. "I heard a voice on the other side of the door," my sister's voice. She was begging, pleading. "Let me out," I swear it was her, so I opened that metal door. Feeling the chef's gaze, I ate a few fries. They were cold and soggy. "What happened?" I asked Stella. When I opened it, something suddenly brushed past me, something cold and wet. It touched me very briefly. There was pain. Stella unconsciously touched the Z-shaped scar on her neck, then continued. "Anyway, there was no room on the other side of the door, just empty space, a profound void. When the trip ended, I immediately felt a change. I felt like I was being watched. That whole night, the next day, the next week, something was following me. A shadow, a presence. And I knew, deep down, I knew if it caught up to me, if it touched me again, I would die." She continued to stab the muffin, breaking the crust so the solidified blueberries slowly oozed out in a thin stream of jelly. "You said you can't see this thing, Stella." The diner door opened, and 2 men in overalls walked in, each holding a hard hat, their clothes dusty. Stella suddenly sat up straight. "2 men just walked into the diner, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, just those 2. Stella relaxed. "Why me?" I asked. "Why did you want to meet?" "To tell you this story." Stella smiled, the first time she had all night. "Because I knew you would believe me." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "You were a good friend." Stella blinked away rising emotion. In high school, when things went bad with boyfriends or jerks, you were the one I could confide in. The one who trusted me, the one who, no matter what I did, no matter how stupid, you were there. A shoulder to cry on, a hand to hold. And she reached across the table, taking my hand, squeezing it tight. The truth was, I had a crush on Stella all through high school. She was a friend, sure, for a time, a good friend. I liked being her rock, but I always hoped for more. Like most friendships, it started with my one-sided attraction. And even after half a year apart, those feelings were still there. Dormant but present, waiting to be awakened. As Stella held my hand and smiled, I noticed I felt her fingernail scratch something into my palm. At first, it was light, just a little pressure, but it sharpened until it hurt like hell. I pulled my hand back and saw Stella had cut me. She had used her sharp, pinky fingernail to etch a shape into my skin, a reversed Z, like the marks on her neck. A trail of blood began to seep from the middle of the small cut. "What the hell, Stella?" She just shook her head and stood up, backing away from the table, repeating, I'm sorry, I had to do it." "Okay, what did I do? You hurt me," I said, angry and confused. Everyone in the diner turned to look at us. Only the chef stood up from his seat at the counter and walked over, wanting to help. I waved him off. "It's okay, I've got this." That's when Stella broke down, her voice reduced to a whisper. "What?" I told him I was fine. Her face was pale. Who did you tell?" "The chef," I yelled. "He just wanted to help you." "There's no chef," Stella said. "There's no one there." Stella started screaming, backing away wildly. She bumped into a nearby table. Chairs fell, knives and forks scattered. No, she screamed. "There's no one there." The chef knelt beside Stella, and for a split second, even in my confusion, I actually thought he would help her up. He didn't. Instead, he leaned close to her. She was crying and trembling, clearly unable to see him. The chef turned to me, nodded with a sick smile, then opened his mouth wide to reveal blood-stained gums full of sharp teeth. He tore out her throat with a single bite. And as Stella's blood sprayed onto the linoleum floor, the chef vanished. Not fading, not dissolving into bone, just there 1 second, gone the next. Someone screamed. I think it was the woman in the green pea coat. Later, when the police arrived, a story emerged. Everyone else in the diner that night said Stella had cut her own throat with a knife. Where she got the knife from, and where it went, they didn't know. They also said the chef had tried to help her. He tried to close the wound and save her life. The police didn't find him after the paramedics arrived. When I went back to the diner the next day to ask what had happened, the waiter insisted they didn't even have a chef matching my description. The man I saw was as if after Stella's death, every detail of her passing began to dissolve, as if the universe was erasing her existence completely. And now the traveler, whatever it is, has come for me. It's been 5 days since Stella died in that diner. 5 days I've been haunted and hunted. I found Corey, and he led me to Genevieve. She told me the fate that awaited me. According to her, the traveler used the reversed Z symbol on Stella's neck, the one she carved into my skin, to track its victims. Stella, I guess she thought she could trick the traveler into taking me instead of her. It didn't work, and now she has cursed me. It's only a matter of time before there's an extra person, someone I can't see, sitting across from me on the bus or walking behind me on the street. Right now, I'm in my bedroom at my parents' house. I haven't left here in 48 hours, and they're worried about me. They heard I lost a friend. Even though they don't remember anyone named Stella attending school with me, they're sympathetic and let me lock myself away. But they say I have a guest, someone who arrived unannounced. Someone who, when I stuck my head out the window to look, was standing on the porch, but there was no one there. Only my parents talking, gesturing into thin air. I'll have to leave this room soon. Otherwise, my parents will get so worried they'll take me away, maybe to a hospital. And when I get there, I'll ask the same question as Stella. How many people are in this room? Exactly how many? Ryan is still in his room. He's still counting, and he knows sooner or later the numbers won't match. I won't tell you to count the people around you. I won't make you paranoid. But if someone asks you how many people are in the room, count carefully. And if they relax when you say the number, perhaps you should ask why. I wish you a peaceful night, if possible. It's midnight, the hour doctors say the human soul is weakest, the hour when the boundary between life and death is thinnest. I just received a letter, or rather, a confession. The sender calls himself Isaac, a father who has lost everything. He writes from an unspecified location, only stating, where I await the end of the world. I read this story 3 times before deciding to share it with you, not because I doubted its authenticity, but because it was too painful, too cruel to a father's soul. But Isaac wants everyone to know. He wants to warn us about children who are not truly ours, even if we gave birth to them. I remember stepping into the house on a cold winter night, snow and icy wind blowing through the front door as I entered. Thick ice cleared, I noticed a strange smell in the house. It almost smelled like bed bugs with a hint of copper and bleach. I hated the smell of bed bugs. "Honey," I called, "where are you? I'm starving, and by the way, there's a strange smell in the house." Traffic was almost gridlocked for half an hour on I-80. A truck had overturned in the blizzard, blocking all 3 lanes. We could only bypass through the emergency lane until the police arrived and started. My voice trailed off as I noticed drops of blood on the floor leading from the hallway into the kitchen. I stopped speaking immediately, looking around for signs of an intruder. I saw nothing. No broken windows, no forced doors, no ransacked drawers or cabinets. "Oh my God," I whispered, immediately heading to the kitchen to grab the largest butcher knife from the knife block. The blade gleamed, freshly sharpened, and ready to cut through the toughest meat. I was careful not to step on the blood drops. I didn't want to disturb the scene if it was indeed a crime scene. I paused, thinking of calling 911, but a voice inside urged me. "It will take 50 minutes for the police to arrive, maybe longer," it said. "And you need to check on your family now. Right now." Running forward, I followed the blood trail down the hallway and straight to the first-floor bathroom. The door was closed. I tried the handle and found it locked. "Is someone in there?" I said, banging on the door. "Open up." "Isaac, is that you?" a weak voice asked. I recognized my wife's voice immediately. "Open this damn door," I yelled. Waves of anxiety and adrenaline surged through my body, and I immediately knew something was terribly wrong. I could hear it in my wife's dying voice, see it glistening on the floor in drops of crimson blood, feel it in the air like the pressure drop before a dragon. "Jenna, open the door." I heard a faint rustling in the small bathroom, like someone dragging themselves across the floor. Then I heard a click. I opened the door and saw a nightmarish chamber behind the threshold. My only son floated face down in the bathtub. My wife sat on the edge of the tub, rocking back and forth, her eyes flat and dead. "Why?" I whispered in horror. "Why did you do this?" "Don't you know?" she mumbled in a hoarse voice. "Don't you really know our son is the empty lord?" Perhaps I had suspected something was wrong with Max, not just the dead animals I kept finding scattered around the yard and under the house, not just the way his eyes seemed to glow in the dark when I tucked him into bed. No, it was a feeling, a cold, empty sensation that seemed to follow him everywhere. He had no friends at school, and animals avoided him like the plague. Dogs would start barking and whining when he walked down the street, and cats would hiss and then disappear with a quick flick of their tail behind bushes or up trees. These things individually wouldn't be too much evidence of anything, but they were far from the only evidence that Max was unusual. A month ago, a few boys tried to bully Max at school. They ran out of the bathroom where it happened, crying and wetting their pants as blood streamed from their noses and ears. They didn't tell anyone what had happened, and Max just kept smiling and staring at them with his big black eyes. The school called an ambulance. They had to sit in the emergency room for 3 hours before the bleeding stopped. They were white as sheets when it finally clotted, and doctors didn't know the cause. The 2 boys disappeared a few days later. The case attracted media attention. The FBI got involved, but they found nothing. It was as if the boys had just vanished through a window, and their trail immediately went cold. Tracking dogs couldn't find any scent, as if they had teleported from their bedrooms. Moreover, no neighbors saw anything. A few months later, some hikers found the boys' fingers growing from a tree on the Appalachian Trail more than 50 miles away. The FBI swooped in and used DNA testing to confirm the fingers belonged to the missing boys from Max's school. No one could explain how the rotten fingers had become fused with the tree. No one tried to bully Max after that. In fact, other children kept as much distance from him as possible. I tried to observe Max when he didn't know I was watching. He was just an 8-year-old boy, but he could wear a mask like a psychopath and charm almost anyone he met. But as soon as they turned away, he would frown and squint as if to stab them in the back. But this was my son, after all. I loved him, and I thought he loved me in his own strange way. Even my wife said she loved him, and she claimed that's why she had to kill him. A strange kind of love, I admit, but I don't think she was lying. I think she had come to love him, and she feared what would happen when his ascension was complete, and he sat on a throne of bones, crushing the lives of millions with an iron heart. She feared the consequences for him. She said it was only for him, and she loved him. And so she had to kill him and stop it now before he grew into a crushing machine that would devour his soul and drag him to hell. "Are you my real father?" Max had asked me that morning as I sat at the kitchen table. I slowly put my coffee cup down, my hand trembling, then turned to look at my son. "Yes, of course," I said in a shaky voice. "Why would you ask such a crazy question?" He stared at me for a long time, his eyes so black they looked like voids. They glowed with an inner light. His pale, smooth skin looked as smooth as thought, and his black hair framed his chiseled features. If not for his coldness and cruelty, he would have been a very beautiful boy. Instead, he radiated a lunar chill, an aura that gave light but no warmth, a kind of cold, reptilian indifference that permeated everything he did. He would laugh at fatal car accidents on the highway or at news of war and murder. "I don't think you're my real father," Max said, still staring at me, reading me like a book. I felt myself start to sweat. "Max, that's ridiculous," I said. "Your mother and I are married." "Then where does your power come from?" he asked. "Why do you possess something that you will never have? I know I'm related to Mother." He spat out the word as if it were something dirty. "Mother, but not you. I don't know where my divinity comes from. You seem weak and foolish to me. At least Mother has the courage to admit and hate me. You grovel and pretend. And when I turn my back, you mock me and my ascension. I know you do. You're the last of so many others. Your kind cannot exterminate like bed bugs, hopping across the world without meaning or willpower. You don't understand people like me. You never could understand people like me, not in a million years." "You're living in a fantasy world," I said. "You think you're living in a fantasy world," he said. "If it were a fantasy world, it wouldn't be revealed, but it will be soon. Everyone will see, even you. I will be with my true father and become the absolute king of this world. Small men like you will grovel like worms. They will be crushed beneath my feet as I rise to heights never dreamed of as part of my becoming. My greatness will shine like a second sun. Everyone will remember my name with fear and horror for 1,000 years." He spoke like a much older boy. I stared at him, mouth agape. He had a faraway look in his eyes, a glint of fanaticism that sharpened his cold features. I remembered when Max was just a little boy. Did I know it then? When I watched him play with his toys, did I know what he was? I think I would have run screaming from the room if I had known. Max turned and left the room, grabbing his backpack as the school bus stopped in front of the house. I watched him go. He walked with the confidence and straight back of a soldier, yet I thought I saw an aura of darkness swirling around him. I blinked, and like mist under a hot summer sun, I saw it dissolve into thin air. I looked away, sweating and trembling. With a shaky hand, I tried to lift my coffee cup. It immediately fell to the floor from my tense fingers and shattered. 50 minutes later, I was working from home when the first ambulances and police cars sped by, heading towards Max's school. My neighbor, a teacher at the school whom the children called Mr. Hallen, told me the story from his perspective later that day. I don't know how much I believed then, probably nothing. Now, everything. "The day started quite normally," Mr. Hallen said, pushing his oversized glasses up his long, scholarly face. "The children were starting to pour into the main classroom. The bell rang. I began preparing my lecture notes for first period. That's when the screaming started from the end of the hallway. It sounded like a girl being murdered, just endless, agonizing screams that went on forever. Suddenly, it cut off, and everything was deathly silent. The students all looked at each other nervously. A strange, hissing voice echoed through the loudspeakers, a reptilian voice that made my skin crawl. It started speaking, and I immediately knew it wasn't human. Yet it sounded like Max. He'd been in my class for years. Wasn't that strange? Like someone had taken his voice and run it through a synthesizer to deepen and slow it. I heard a strange, hissing breath as it spoke. "Hello, everyone." The voice whispered, but the words echoed through every classroom and hallway. "We have a very special day planned for you. Activities have been prepared, and the festivities will now begin. Do not try to escape now, that breaks the rules. The first lamb has been slaughtered. Good luck." I thought some hooligan had snuck into the office and somehow used the loudspeaker while the secretary was out getting a cup of coffee or going to the restroom. I raised my hand as the class chattered, trying to calm them. Children, I said, Clearly this is just a prank, please calm down. Then the classroom door burst open and a girl ran inside. She was covered in blood from head to toe. She had deep cuts on the back of her head, her forehead, her right cheek, and her right arm. Large, foul drops of blood fell behind her as she ran, as if leaving a trail of breadcrumbs to find her way back. The wounds on her body changed color before our eyes, turning purple, then black. Necrotic tissue began to spread and die within moments. Black blood flowed from the wounds. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, but only choked gasps escaped. Something had infested the girl. I could see it. I quickly backed away, feeling like I was dreaming. "Please, oh God, please help me," she whispered, crying, her legs buckled. She fell to her knees. The children in the class began to scream. "Please, someone help me." Her voice grew louder, her skin paler as patches of purple, dead tissue spread. She opened her mouth and began to vomit a foul, oily sludge. "It hurts so much, it hurts so much," she groaned, falling into the puddle of vomit. "No one will help me." I ran to her side. I didn't know this girl, she wasn't in any of my classes, but I knew she needed immediate medical attention. "What happened?" I asked. "Who did this?" She reached for my hand and whispered, "There are things in the hallway that shouldn't exist," she said, still crying. She coughed up more blood and black liquid, then rolled onto her back and gasped. Her eyelids fluttered and her skin was pale. I thought she was losing consciousness until her eyes rolled back in her head and she sat up, grinning. Claws began to tear from her fingers, black tears streamed down her face, and black sludge dripped from her mouth like sick drool. Her body stretched, and her limbs broke and twisted. I could hear the sound of bones breaking like branches in a winter storm. I watched in horror as she transformed, backing away. The other children were all screaming and scrambling to the back of the classroom. The girl hissed as black veins appeared all over her face and neck. She stood up and walked towards the terrified children in the back, moving as smoothly as a synchronized dancer, jerking and twisting, nightmarish in their own way. But what happened next was far worse. Her body grew taller, thinner, and gaunter as it stretched towards the ceiling, at least 7 feet tall by then. Her arms reached out, sharp, bony white claws as she attacked the screaming children in front. I saw drops of blood splash against the back wall as a few boys stumbled forward, their throats slit wide. Their terrified faces were pale and bloodless as they choked and tried to scream, but only gasps escaped. I saw the window open, and I was on the first floor. I decided to run to try to find help. I knew we needed police and paramedics on the scene, and there was nothing I could do to save the children. Honestly, I felt like crap about it. But I ran. As the screams followed me from the back of the classroom, I leaped straight through the window and ran across the playground and climbed the fence. But as I went, I heard a strange, shrill laugh from the loudspeaker. And you know what? I'm convinced the voice sounded like Max. Max came home early from school that day, grinning widely. He was in a good mood. I don't know what happened after the teacher left or how many people died in that horrific building. But I know Max caused all of it, the first exploratory steps on his path to ascension, the foundation for his throne of bones. Mr. Hallen had spoken to Jenna early that morning, right after running home from that nightmare den, and she had devised a plan. When Max came home from school, she gave him a bottle of Gatorade with a large amount of fentanyl. She had bought it from a random drug dealer downtown, dissolved inside. She added a little sugar to mask any slight bitterness and handed it to the smiling boy with his big, coal-black eyes. He drank it quickly, watching her the whole time with dilated eyes. He smiled and stood up, but soon after, collapsed. Jenna found him unconscious in his bedroom and dragged him to the bathroom. She filled the tub and held his cheeks under the water until the bubbles stopped. As my wife explained everything to me, a sense of loss and horror washed over me. I don't know if I would miss Max. His swollen, bluish-purple face left no doubt that he was dead. I carried my wife out and sat her down, debating whether to call the police. No one had ever told me what to do in this situation, and I felt like I was fumbling. I stood up and paced. I went to the kitchen and started brewing instant coffee. Light footsteps rustled behind me. I turned to see Max, seemingly alive and well, but also fundamentally changed in a disturbing way. His eyes were now completely black. He floated inches above the ground behind my wife, smiling at me. His teeth seemed sharper and much longer than before. An electric sensation crackled in the air. I could see a kind of expanding black aura rippling around his pale skin, dark and cold like empty space. Goosebumps rose on my body just from being near that morbid aura. The kettle began to whistle behind me. Behind Max, I saw the strange, mutated children from school crawling out of the front hallway. 4 or 5, they moved on thin, twisted legs, bending in ways no human leg should bend. Their heads almost scraped the low kitchen ceiling, their pale, broken arms reaching down to their knees, jointed in multiple areas. I could hear the faint sound of bones breaking now as they slowly advanced. A soft, snapping sound like small branches being crushed underfoot. Their blank white eyes constantly dripped black tears, staining their bleached, bloodless skin. "Mother," Max said in a condescending tone, like a disappointed parent. "You should have known you couldn't kill me except by decapitation or burning my body. Did you think my real father would let a worthless insect like you kill me before I ascended to my throne? Are you so stupid and blind?" Jenna began to cry, refusing to look at her son. "But I respect the courage in your actions. For that, I will give you a quick death." He looked directly at me. "That's something you won't get, my false father. You are a weak, worthless coward, and you deserve a slow death, screaming until your throat is hoarse and begging for release. For the screams of the weak resonate like a beautiful symphony in the ears of my true father and me. The death of the weak will pave the way for a new world." He gestured to the mutated children behind them. Their bodies had become so twisted and deformed that I couldn't tell if they were boys or girls. Now they just looked like monsters, like zombies. In a flash, one of them darted forward and grabbed my wife's head. A gurgling scream rose in my throat as I watched, but everything ended before I knew what was happening. The creature used its crooked, clawed fingers to twist her head, snapping her neck in a second. Jenna's face now looked straight backward, the skin on her neck spiraling into morbid folds. On her broken flesh, I saw ruptured blood vessels and rapidly spreading bruises. She gasped a death rattle, releasing an endless, choking breath, her eyelids fluttering and her fingers twitching. Then she was silent. Max let out a slow, deep laugh, a shrill sound that seemed to rise from the depths of his withered soul. His black eyes gleamed with amusement and delight. Max grinned widely, his fangs shining and white, reflecting the cold winter sunlight streaming through the window. The kettle began to whistle as plumes of steam rose. Without hesitation, I spun around and grabbed it, popping the lid by pressing the button on the handle. Then I threw it at Max, boiling water flying in a spiral as the metal kettle spun through the air. It all seemed to happen in slow motion. I saw Max's triumphant and delighted expression turn into a frown of hatred and anger, but the movement was too fast and precise for him to move in time. The heavy metal kettle hit his face, spilling scalding hot water all over his face and neck. He screamed and fell backward, crashing into the mutated bodies of the children he had transformed into mindless followers. I ran towards the door without looking back, heading outside. The continuous stream of police cars and ambulances heading towards the school had stopped. Now, dozens of black SUVs poured into town. Men in dark suits with mirrored sunglasses emerged. I looked back at the house and saw a few newcomers running inside with automatic rifles. I heard rifle fire and horse screams. The mutated children ran out of my house, their bodies riddled with bullet holes. They gradually lost energy as black blood flowed from multiple large wounds eating into their bodies. Finally, they collapsed onto the street and died with their last breath. But they never found Max. They quarantined the town and went from house to house, from building to building, searching for the source of all this death and evil. But he had somehow escaped. They killed all the mutated fanatics they could find, but the bodies of many children from the school didn't seem to count. I knew where they had gone. They had followed Max, fanatical soldiers for his new army, unafraid of death and committed to their leader and his new world order. I don't know where Max went or where he will appear next, but I know he is progressing towards his ascension. And the next time I see him, he will come in power and glory and crush the lives of millions underfoot. An 8-year-old child, your own child, and you have to face the truth that he is not human, that he is something else. Isaac included a picture of Max's classroom, a boy with black hair, porcelain white skin, and eyes. I can't describe those eyes. They were black, but not just black, they were like holes in the universe. As if looking into them was to look into nothingness. Jenna tried to stop the unstoppable. She loved her child enough to kill him. But how do you kill something that cannot die? Perhaps right now, somewhere in the world, Max is growing, gathering his followers, preparing for his ascension, and Isaac. He is waiting for the day his son know, the thing that wears his son's form returns to finish what it started. Hug your children tight tonight, look into their eyes, and pray that you see love there, not darkness. Hello again, it's me, Jeff, your companion on these sleepless late nights. The clock has just struck midnight. At this moment, I hold a letter, or rather an email, sent to me by a listener in the American West. Her name is Rebecca, and the story she tells. Honestly, after reading it, I had to turn on all the lights in the studio before I dared to sit alone here. This email is quite long. It seems Rebecca has kept this story to herself for the past 9 years. She writes, "Dear Jeff, you probably won't believe the story I'm about to tell. Honestly, sometimes I wish I could forget it all myself. But no, it haunts me every night, especially in the autumn when the leaves turn yellow and the air is crisp. Just like that fateful day, they called it the suicide room, room 733 in Riley Dormitory. From the very first day of my freshman year, I heard about this terrifying name. As if worrying about studies and new friends wasn't enough to stress me out. Lydia, my best friend since childhood, and I were assigned to room 734. At first, I was a little disappointed not to be in the newly built South Wing, but at least the school indulged us by putting us together. Our room was in the old wing on the 7th floor, tiny rooms built in the 1910s. On moving in morning, while I was taping posters to the wall and Lydia was reading a book, our dorm manager appeared. Bate, a blonde girl energetic to the point of being annoying. "Hi, you two, I'm Bate, this year's floor manager." She bounced into the room with a bright, forced smile. Bate picked up a drawing of Cthulhu that Lydia had made last summer, tilted her head, and asked a question that made Lydia glare. "Is this the octopus from Pirates of the Caribbean?" The air became suffocatingly awkward. Bate stood there, pursing her lips, while the room fell into heavy silence. "Hey," I tried to break the atmosphere. "The corner room next to us, 733, looks much bigger than this one. Is anyone there, or can we?" "Oh, you don't want that room," Bate interrupted me. "There have been a few suicides in there, one hanging and one jump from the window. If I remember correctly, they don't assign anyone to that room anymore." She said it as casually as if announcing the lunch menu. Then she reminded us of dorm rules about boys not being allowed on this floor after 11 p.m. She clapped her hands and disappeared from the room. Lydia dropped her book on the bed, staring out into the hallway. "I hate that girl. Did you hear what Bate said? Suicides in the same room. I'm going to call her Idiot Bate," Lydia mumbled. "Come on, Rebecca. Every university has a few suicides," I said. "Yeah, but in the same room," Lydia sighed. "What does it matter? It's not our room." I turned to look at the tiny window in our room. Can you imagine having to climb out that tiny window and jump down at least 5 seconds in the air before? I didn't finish the sentence. "Oh my God, B, can you stop?" Lydia shivered. "You know how afraid of heights I am. Just thinking about it makes me want to faint." I teased, "Or how about we switch to the suicide room? It has 2 big windows." "You jerk, but seriously, it would take a lot of determination to squeeze through that tiny window," Lydia mumbled. "And thinking back, people used to be smaller, right?" Then she silently pushed her bed further away from the window. Thanks to Lydia's outgoing nature, we quickly made many new friends. The first few weeks were all about partying, and of course, Lydia met a guy, Mike, a typical freshman pledging a fraternity. After about a month, the excitement of college cooled down. We spent more time studying than socializing. Midterms were approaching, and I was determined to maintain a 4 GPA throughout my freshman year. Then one night in early October, I was woken by a strange sound. A creaking, grinding noise from the room next door. "What the hell is that?" Lydia whispered in the dark. It was the window. The window of room 733 was opening and closing. Opening and slamming shut repeatedly, asterisk creak, slam, asterisk. "Who's messing with us?" I whispered. "No one's there," Lydia's voice trembled. "Rebecca, that room is locked from the outside. I saw the big padlock." I ran into the hallway to check. Indeed, the door to room 733 had a storage room sign and a large padlock hanging outside. There was no way anyone could be inside, but the window noise continued throughout that night. After the incident with the golden eye under the door crack, Lydia and I decided to apply for a room change. We agreed never to be alone in the room at night. Most nights, we slept at our boyfriends' places. I told Ian, my boyfriend, everything, and he suggested we meet the school's paranormal club. I reluctantly agreed. The following Tuesday, Lydia and I met a guy named Craig and 4 of his colleagues. After hearing our entire story, Craig solemnly declared, "You're dealing with a very angry ghost." Lydia snorted, "What do you mean?" "A vengeful spirit. Suicides always leave angry ghosts. They need revenge." "Revenge on whom?" I asked. "Other students. Perhaps this spirit was bullied to the point of suicide and now wants to torment others." Craig even offered to perform an exorcism for us for a small donation. Lydia immediately pulled me out of there. "Those guys are playing Ghostbusters, and we're living in a horror movie," she mumbled as we headed to the dorm office. Fortunately, our room change application was approved. I moved to Morton, Lydia to Tinsley, but we had to wait until Monday to move. Ms. Alice at the office said she had researched the suicides at Riley. She said there was something very ancient and very evil in that room. Not 3, but 5 people had died. Alan Burnham jumped from the window. Tad Collinsworth jumped from the window. Marissa Grigg. Aidan Murphy jumped from the window. Eric Dostin hanged himself. "It's bound to that room," Alice said. "And all the victims died when they were alone. Be careful, it's very cunning." On the 5th night before Halloween, everything went wrong. Lydia left a voicemail at 11:04 p.m. "I just had a fight with Mike. His fraternity is making pledges sleep overnight in the suicide room for Halloween. He even said all the weird stuff was staged by his frat to create a buzz. I can't take it anymore. I'm going back to my room to sleep. Don't worry, I'm drunk enough to sleep through any noise from next door." My heart stopped. Lydia was sleeping alone in room 734. Early the next morning, Alice and I went to find Mr. Tom Moan, the only living person who had been at Riley in 1961. But he had quit his job and disappeared. The librarian, Steph, finally revealed the truth. Her best friend, Alan, was the first victim, and the most important thing she said was, "You're mistaken. Room 733 isn't the corner room. When they built the south wing, they renumbered. The corner room is now a storage room, and the real room 733 is your room, 734. The blood in my veins froze. We had been in the wrong room all along. Lydia was in the real suicide room. Alice and I ran like crazy back to the dorm. From a distance, we saw the corner room window closed for the first time, while my room's window was wide open. As we burst into the room, Lydia turned to look at me. For a fleeting moment, a cruel spark of hope flickered across her tear-stained face. But it was too late. She leaned gently and disappeared through the window. Lydia's scream echoed all 7 stories down to the ground. Alice ran to the window, looked down, then turned back with a pale face, tears streaming. Screams from below echoed, and I collapsed to the floor. All over the room were drawings Lydia had made throughout the night. Her mother dead, her sister dead, all her loved ones dead in indescribably horrific paintings. I vomited right there, and then a piece of paper slipped from beneath the closet door. It was a drawing by Lydia, depicting the view from where I was sitting towards the closet. The closet door was ajar, and something was peering out from the darkness. I strained my eyes to look into the real closet. The door was ajar, just like in the drawing, and I saw a long, gaunt face with golden eyes staring at me. Alice pulled me away from there. I never went back to that room. I transferred schools the very next semester. But every night for the past 9 years, I still dream of Lydia. I dream of her climbing through the tiny window frame, standing on the cold ledge, looking down at the 7 stories of empty space below. I see the horror etched on that familiar face as she realizes her terrible fate. She was afraid of heights. She always said she never wanted to die that way. This year, I called the dorm. They said Riley was full, but I was lucky because they had just been allowed to reopen the 7th floor. I hung up and trembled as I wrote this email to you, Jeff. Someone needs to know. Someone needs to warn those innocent kids who are about to move in there. Please believe me, and please be careful. I really don't know what to say. Lydia, a girl afraid of heights, was forced to jump from the 7th floor. And the most horrific thing is that Rebecca and Lydia had been in the actual suicide room all along without even knowing it. Rebecca also included a local newspaper clipping reporting Lydia's death. It's real, completely real. I don't know about you, but I'll never look at old dorm rooms the same way again. Sometimes places that hold too much tragedy become twisted, turning into something that no longer belongs to this world. If any of you are in college, be careful of rooms with dark histories. Never be alone, and if something feels off, move out immediately. Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing this heartbreaking story. I hope Lydia has found peace. To lighten the mood a little in the next chapter, I'll read another story. Equally chilling, but at least no one has to die. See you then. Tonight, it's raining heavily, isn't it? This cold weather is perfect for telling ghost stories. I'm Jeff, and you're listening to my late-night storytelling program on my channel. The next story, I must confess, when I first read it, I had to stop several times to regain my composure. This is a handwritten letter from a father in suburban London. He didn't leave his real name, only signed it as you. The content of the letter is quite heavy. If any of you have small children, you might want to consider before listening further. Dear Jeff, I don't know who to tell this to. Perhaps I've truly gone mad, but I need to say it just once. My daughter, Sam, died on her 6th birthday. Today, someone just gave me pictures. Pictures of my wife's 7th birthday. Bea passed away giving birth to Sam. Bea was beautiful, intelligent, with such a hearty laugh that every time we went to a restaurant, it was a challenge. Her gaze was so intense it made my hands tremble. I lost her when Sam was born. I could resent Sam for taking Bea away, but no, I know Bea wouldn't want that. She wouldn't want our only daughter to grow up in hatred. Sam was an energetic child, always running, climbing, causing chaos at kindergarten. On her 6th birthday, after going to the movies with friends, she was so full of energy that I couldn't keep up as she trotted along the sidewalk. "Daddy, hurry," she yelled, looking back. I tried to catch up. Honestly, I tried. But Sam was so focused on me that she ran into the street. The bus couldn't brake in time. The sound of breaking bones. The world went silent. I held her body in my arms, numb, unable to cry. Warm blood soaked my clothes. In my shock, I could only think of how to clean these jeans. At the funeral, I wore all black. Not just my clothes, my soul was dark too. Everyone came to offer condolences, talking about Sam as if I didn't know my child was an angel. A strange man approached and handed me a thick leather album. At the time, I thought it was an album of Sam with her friends, or perhaps I was too grief-stricken to notice the details. His hands were cold, and he never mentioned Sam. A month later, when my sister came to comfort me, I finally opened the album. The first page contained Polaroid photos of Sam growing up, but all were taken from a distance, blurry. I was in a few of them. Who took these photos? I flipped through, hoping for an explanation. Here's Sam at 5 years old with the small bicycle I gave her. A photo of her scraped knee. Then a photo from the morning of her 6th birthday, wearing a pink raincoat, my arm around her shoulder. No photo of the accident. Instead, Sam's life continued in the album. Her 7th birthday. Sam and I in the garden, covered in paint, a large painting on the ground. Her 7th birthday. I slammed the album shut and gasped. This must be a sick joke. Someone photoshopped it, but I couldn't help but keep reading. Sam grew up page by page. She lost her baby teeth her first day of middle school. I flipped through the pages frantically and realized something. The photographer was getting closer. Teenage Sam, as beautiful as her mother, with curly hair and a radiant smile. I grew older, but my photos appeared less and less. Her 16th birthday, Sam with friends having a picnic in the park, but there was someone in the bushes behind, a dark shadow with a small shadow on the grass. The dark shadow appeared more and more in each photo. I began to recognize the features. He was tall, and he was getting closer and closer to Sam. Near her 18th birthday, Sam was no longer in a place I recognized. The photos showed her in a dark house, her face contorted with fear. Sometimes dressed as an ancient queen, sometimes as a maid scrubbing floors. The dark shadow was always there, his feet, his hands, in every photo. No matter how she was dressed, Sam's face was always filled with pain and despair. There were bruises on her face, she was thin and looked sick. I couldn't take it anymore, but I kept looking at the last photo before I slammed the album shut and swore never to open it again. Her 18th birthday photo. The caption below. Finally, Sam kneeling, wearing a black formal gown, an apple in her mouth, her hands tied behind her back. Mascara smudged from tears. Her eyes seemed to be pleading with me to save her, but I couldn't. I folded the album shut and walked away, trembling and sobbing. I couldn't call the police. She was dead, after all. But Jeff, do you know what keeps me awake every night? Not the content of the photos, but the fact that the album still has so many blank pages. Excuse me, I need a moment. The pictures of a future that never existed. A child imprisoned in another reality, and still so many blank pages. I don't know what to think about this story. Perhaps it's a father's grief that makes him see things that aren't real. Or perhaps there are things that exist beyond the boundaries of death that we shouldn't know about. If any of you have lost loved ones, hold on to the beautiful memories. Don't let grief turn into obsession. And if a stranger offers you something, perhaps it's best not to accept. We'll take a short break here. When we return, I'll have a lighter story. At least, I hope so. Do you remember your childhood stuffed animals? Those furry friends we hugged every night, confided all our secrets to? I still have my old teddy bear. It sits on my bookshelf, watching me with its loose button eyes, harmless safe. But the story I'm about to tell will make you look at stuffed animals in a completely different way. This email came from a freshman college girl, sent from her dorm room at 2:00 a.m. She signed it Emma. Hi Jeff, this is a story I've never told anyone. Honestly, I'm terrified. I know I did something stupid and dangerous. I understand. I didn't die, but perhaps something worse happened. The internet can be a scary place, everyone knows that. But when I was growing up, it was still pretty new. My mom discovered that if she just gave me an iPad, I would sit quietly for hours. I was probably one of the first iPad kids. Thinking back, I'm so embarrassed. After a few months of watching YouTube, I decided to start my own channel, hoping to become a YouTube star. The concept was just starting to emerge then. My content was always terrible. I filmed dozens of videos with stuffed animals and plastic horses, making up stories and voicing them with my 720p iPad. The plots were messy, narrated by a lisping child. Most videos only got 1 view, mine, or 2 if I showed my mom. Thinking back, Mom probably didn't know I was uploading them publicly because she just laughed it off. My favorite toy was Cheer Bear, the pink bear from the Care Bears cartoon. Cheer Bear's personality was always cheerful, so of course, I cast her as a tormented hero, an orphan, kidnapped, abandoned, depending on my peculiar imagination. I noticed videos with Cheer Bear got more views. Not many, about 5 or 6 views. But for me at the time, that was a huge number. Then one night, everything changed. I got my first subscriber, account named CheerBear20G7. The profile picture was a cute, hand-drawn pink bear. She liked many of my videos, added them to a Cheer Bear Adventures playlist that collected videos of other kids my age. She commented sweet things. She remembered when the things in the video happened to her and praised me for being a good filmmaker. Sounds pathetic, doesn't it? But for me at the time, those compliments were like the first rays of sun after a long winter. When I told my mom about the things I liked, she was kind, but I felt she didn't really care. Mom happily tucked me into screens and lived her own life. She used to talk about the importance of being independent, and I guess that included making my own friends. Especially a friend who was also excited about the things I loved. I started texting with Cheer Bear daily through the comments section. At first, she suggested new stories, then asked what cartoons I liked if I had siblings. Normal questions. I once said it was cold where I lived, and she asked where. I said the name of my city, and by coincidence, she lived nearby, less than an hour away. And knowing that, she asked, "Do you want to meet the real Cheer Bear?" I know, please be understanding. I was almost 9 years old then. My mom had just let me try walking home from school alone. I was allowed to walk home after school, unlock the door myself, make snacks, Mom told me not to use knives or the stove, and play by myself until Mom got home. I wish I had told Mom about my new friend and that she wanted to visit. But no, I carefully typed my home address into the comments section, along with the line, "Mom usually gets home at 5 p.m. Have you ever noticed how anticipation and excitement sometimes feel the same? On the day Cheer Bear was supposed to visit, I couldn't sit still at school. I was as proud as if I was keeping a secret that my friends didn't deserve to know. When the bell rang, I flew 5 blocks home. I had been in the house for only a minute when there was a knock at the door. I want to assure you that nothing bad happened that day. Really, though it sounds strange, I opened the door, and Cheer Bear stood there, her pink fur so large she had to tilt to fit through the door. She carried 2 things, a cassette player under one arm and a brown teddy bear under the other. As soon as she was inside, I couldn't stop talking, asking questions, telling her how happy I was. Cheer Bear led me to the middle of the room and gestured for me to stand still. I watched her, trembling with excitement. She placed the bear on the shelf in front of us, the cassette player on the floor. For a moment, she turned her back, and I saw her remove her glove to press play. I remember thinking, that's strange, why are her arms so hairy? Music filled the air. I remember hearing a classmate boast that he had met Mickey Mouse at Disneyland recently. Just a few minutes of waving, but he boasted about it for weeks afterward. What happened with Cheer Bear was completely different. The CD started with the Care Bears theme song and she danced. Every lyric had its own movement, spinning and waving her arms. When the song ended, she hugged me tightly, and then a new song started with new choreography. It repeated like that: new song, a hug, continuously. She moved around the room faster with an almost frantic energy. I remember dancing along, catching up to her speed, breathless each time I fell into her embrace. She was bigger than my mom, her soft fur smelled of damp earth. After what felt like an eternity, the last note faded. Cheer took both my hands, and we stood looking at each other. Though she didn't say a word, I heard heavy breathing inside the costume. Then she led me to face the bear on the shelf, and together we took a deep bow. The visit was over. She placed me on a chair, gathered the cassette player and teddy bear, and left. She struggled to fit through the doorway. As soon as I closed the door, I ran to the window to look, but she was gone. Mom didn't believe me, and I don't blame her. It sounds crazy. A giant version of my favorite stuffed animal came to my house, danced all afternoon, then left. At least I was smart enough not to boast about it at school. Even then, I knew how unbelievable it was, but something about that day changed me. I felt chosen, blessed, like the characters in my videos. Overnight, I gained unprecedented confidence. I asked Mom for dance lessons, thinking maybe I'd be better if Cheer Bear came back. I no longer hid in the bathroom during lunch. I started talking to friends in class. I was never popular, but found a few oddballs who liked the same things as me, and we chatted constantly on MSN Messenger after school. I gradually stopped making YouTube videos. For the first time in my life, I had friends. I was no longer lonely. By the holidays, meeting Cheer Bear seemed like just a dream. I'm sure I had convinced myself it wasn't real, if not for what happened the week before Christmas. Coming home from school, I found a shimmering pink gift on the doorstep, addressed to me. I opened it and was overjoyed to see a teddy bear exactly like the one Cheer Bear had brought with her. Until tonight, that was the end of my story. This year, I'm a freshman in college in my dorm room. Last Saturday night, I was studying alone when a strange email arrived. Anonymous sender. The content was short. "Is this you?" I was as foolish as I was as a child. I clicked on the link. It led to an unlisted 30-minute YouTube video with a black screen. I pressed play. The Care Bears theme music played first. Care Bears countdown, 4, 3, 2, 1. My heart stopped. The song ended. On the screen appeared an image of me tumbling into the arms of the stranger in the Cheer Bear costume. I watched the entire video. Terrible quality, fisheye lens. Cheer Bear frequently danced out of frame as she moved frantically. But I was always there on screen, clumsy and awkward, trying to dance along. There were details I didn't remember. The fur was matted in several places, large black stains under the armpits and at the joint between the head and body. The alarming size, the person in the costume must have been over 6 feet tall. The costume was almost too small. Sometimes, I saw bare skin between the gloves and sleeves. And finally, the moment Cheer Bear bent down to pick up the camera. I swear I saw a glimmer of eyes through the blank white mesh, with tiny, pinpoint pupils. It's been 3 hours since I received that email. I don't know what to do, and there's one thing I can't stop thinking about. Cheer Bear never brought a camera into my house. She only brought the small brown teddy bear, the bear I received for Christmas that year, the bear I kept in my bedroom every day after that, the bear sitting on my nightstand in my dorm room. I don't know if I should reply to the email and what would happen if I did. Yes, that's me in the video. But who was the other person? A teddy bear, a Christmas gift, a hidden camera all these years. Emma included a picture of the bear. It looked normal, just a small brown teddy bear with black button eyes and a neck bow. But looking closely, something seemed to reflect in its eyes. Perhaps it was just the light. Perhaps I would advise, and anyone listening, to be careful of strangers online, especially when you are young. And if someone sends you a video of yourself from years ago, don't reply, call the police immediately. Our childhoods are supposed to be safe. But sometimes the most beautiful memories hide the darkest truths. We will stop here. When we return, I have other stories to share. Stories of caves, of something hunting in the dark. Go check your old toys. You never know what they've witnessed. It's Jeff again. I know it's late, but I just received a voicemail from a man standing and watching his house burn down. He called me as soon as the firefighters arrived. His voice, I've never heard anyone so panicked. He kept repeating, "It's still here, it's holding my hand." I recorded his story. His name is Scott, and this is what happened tonight. The house is burning. Only 2 of us got out. At first, there were 6 of us tonight. 7, perhaps, that's the problem. I don't know when the 7th person arrived. Gina and Angelo arrived before me while I was still setting out snacks. It certainly wasn't there before them. I remember they were the first ones. It couldn't hide in thin air. Kay arrived next. I know she came alone because I was looking for the right time to ask her out. If she had brought anyone, I definitely would have noticed. When Christoph and Marina arrived, Angelo called out, "It's about time you two showed up." He specifically said, "You too." I remember that. So 5 people arrived, and of course, I was there from the beginning. Perhaps the door was opened at some other time. Now that it's all over, maybe it doesn't matter anymore. But I feel like it does. I need to understand what happened. I owe it to my friends. We were playing cards when we realized it was a 6-player game, and Angelo was dealing cards in front of each player. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a 7th pile for himself. "You dealt too many," Gina said. Angelo looked at the table, confused. There were cards in front of each of us, 7 separate piles. "Strange, isn't it? I don't know what I'm doing," he said. He gathered the cards. He dealt again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 pile for each person. But he still didn't have cards for himself. With a forced laugh, Angelo said, "All right, where did I go wrong? There are 6 of us, right?" We all agreed there were clearly 6 people. "Everyone put your hands on your cards," he said. All 6 cards were covered. Angelo still had no cards. "All right, one more try," Angelo said. "While you're sorting this out, I'm going to the restroom," Kay said, getting up and leaving the room. Angelo dealt cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5th pile for himself. "Kay, how many people are you?" he yelled. "Very funny," she called back. "We heard the bathroom door close." "Just deal 6 piles," I told Angelo. "There are 6 of us, it'll be fine." Each person took a pile and played. No one was left out. "That's how it should be," he said. "But why did I count 7 just now?" "You're bad at math," Gina said. "Best not let him keep score," Christoph chimed in. Kay's chair was pulled close to the table. Angelo dealt the cards. This time there were 6 piles. Everyone took one, no one was left out. "Strange," Angelo shook his head. Despite the shaky start, the card game went well. Christoph won, so he dared us to go get more drinks. Just after he disappeared into another room, I heard a frightening sound, a sort of quick gasp, then a loud thud. I was about to get up to see if he was okay when the wine was brought to the table, and I was busy pouring everyone a fresh glass. I noticed Kay's glass was still untouched from earlier. "Hey, where's Kay?" I asked. "She went to the restroom," Gina replied. "What again?" "I guess so." I tilted my head, looking down the hallway. The bathroom door was closed. "I guess Marina's right. Should we deal another hand?" I asked. "When Christoph gets back," Marina said. I looked around. Christoph wasn't here. "Where did he go?" "Kitchen," Marina replied. "The wine didn't carry itself in here," I pointed out, and all 5 new glasses had already been moved. Marina exclaimed, "Are you implying that someone is drinking Christoph's wine?" We all laughed, but I wondered where Christoph was, and Kay too. She had been in the bathroom too long, but it couldn't be. We were playing cards with 6 people. She must have been here. Perhaps she just wasn't drinking. "Let's play a quick hand of poker while we wait for the other 2 to come back," Angelo suggested. He dealt the cards. "You're only dealing 5 piles," Gina pointed out. Angelo slammed the cards down on the table. "All right, something is going on. Everyone hold hands." We looked at him doubtfully, but he was serious. We reached out and clasped hands, forming a circle around the table. "Now, in order, everyone say the name of the person to their left." My name was called. I looked to my left and said, "Marina, Gina, Angelo," and then I was next to Scott. Angelo nodded at me. "Wait," I protested. My name was already said. "Then say to your right," he said. Angelo's name was called. "Next," he continued, "Gina, Marina, Scott, and Angelo." "No," I said. "I was called first." He said. We looked at each other. I felt his hand in mine. I saw him sitting next to me, looking at this table. Angelo said, "Why is there an extra wine glass between us?" "Take a picture," Marina said, "to see everyone at once." She placed her phone on the table. We backed up, put our arms around each other, and smiled. He took it. We gathered to look, and it was him, me, him, and him, Marina pointed out. 4 people, no one else. Angelo studied it for a moment, not a selfie. Who took it? "Christoph," Marina said. "Kay," I said at the same time. We looked around the room. Neither of them was here. "He must still be in the kitchen," Marina said. I'll go check. I think we should go together, Angelo said. Come on, let's go into the kitchen as a group. Empty, do you smell gas? Gina asked. I noticed the gas stove. 2 of the knobs were broken off. I saw them tucked under a nearby cabinet as if someone had pushed them aside to avoid detection. There was a dent on the metal edge too. Christoph must have dropped something on the stove, I said, stepping forward to turn off the gas. Very kind of him not to say anything. The broken knobs were too deep to turn. The smell of gas started giving me a headache. I grabbed the stove to pull it away from the wall and shut off the valve behind it, but it was unusually heavy. Did I put something in here? I asked. I opened the oven door. Christoph's body was stuffed inside, limbs bent to fit. A pool of blood filled the bottom of the oven, sloshing eerily back and forth as I tried to move the appliance. Most of the blood came from his head, which had been brutally crushed. His eyes bulged, staring at me. I screamed. Of course, we all screamed. I turned to run to find a weapon, perhaps just to not see any more, and Gina died. Her throat was torn open. When I turned back, it wasn't yet, and then suddenly it was. Nothing did it, it just happened. Her hand flew up to cover her mangled throat, but it was too late to hold anything in. She collapsed, her hair held back as she died, keeping her upright and forward so we all saw the panic and despair. We all froze for a second. Angelo moved first, lunging towards her, but as he embraced her, she slumped. She's dead, he yelled, the raw cry of rage and pain. After a moment, he put it into words. Where is it? What did this? I grabbed a knife and leaned back into the corner, looking around wildly. Marina was gone. I hoped she had escaped. I didn't like not knowing. It's been here all night, Angelo growled. Among us, playing with us. Where's Kay? Where has she been all night? Bathroom, I think. But I pictured Christoph's shattered corpse in the oven and knew I didn't want to open that door to check. Angelo continued to scream, his voice cracking with rage. We can't see it, we can't know about it. You and I thought we were holding hands when it was between us. This is just a game to it. We don't know how to play, we don't even see the board. We have to get out of here. Angelo, I said, it's not safe here. Even without this, the gas stove is leaking. Yes, he said, his voice suddenly terrifyingly calm. Everywhere, and you know what? That's a very good way to deal with the unseen. What are you doing, Angelo? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a lighter. The back door is right there, Scott. Run and close it. Don't stop running once you're outside. Angelo, I'm sorry about your house. Scott, run. I stepped towards him, but he pulled the lighter towards himself. Go. If you don't go now, I'll do it while you're still here. Perhaps I should. It's a better way to be sure. He flicked the lighter, sparks flying. I ran towards the door. Behind me, I heard him flick the wheel again. I was outside before the kitchen exploded. My hand was pulling the door closed when a wave of heat and light slammed the door shut and threw me down the stairs into the backyard. Windows spewed flames, throwing hot shards of glass at me. I crawled on the grass, desperately wanting to get further away. My back was burning, and I rolled to extinguish the flames. The house was clearly unsalvageable, but I still called the fire department. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to tell the police when they found bodies in the house. I didn't even know how many they would find. If Angelo killed it, whatever it was, there would be at least 4 bodies. Him, Gina, Christoph, and the other one. Maybe 5, assuming it killed Kay early. Possibly 6 if Marina didn't escape, but one of them must have gotten out. I'm not alone out here. My hand is being held tightly as I watch the house burn. My hand is being held tightly. Scott called me from his front lawn. He said he was alone, but he said one more thing before hanging up. He said it was so cold. The hand holding me, it was cold as ice. I don't know if Scott survived until morning. I don't know what that invisible thing was. But I know one thing, sometimes the friends you invite to your house aren't the scariest things. The scariest things are the ones that invite themselves. Check the number of people in the room with you right now. Count them, then count again. If the numbers don't match, don't panic, don't run. Just remember, it might be holding your hand. Have you ever meticulously read the instructions for medication? Those tiny lines about side effects most of us ignore, right? Carrie didn't. And luckily, or perhaps unluckily, she read them. This email was sent from a mental hospital in California. Carrie wrote it while waiting for her doctor. She says she's not crazy, she just can't tell the difference anymore. Jeff, I got a prescription for Samira on Monday. The previous IBS medication made me vomit, so this time I decided to read the side effect warning on the bottle carefully before taking it. I was relieved to see it was very short, just a few lines. Samira has no physical side effects. However, you may wish the side effects were physical. I stopped and reread that sentence. You may wish the side effects were physical. What? I flipped the bottle, looking for more information, but no, that was all there was. I read it a third time, then a fourth. What did this sentence mean? Should I call Dr. Liu? But he had specifically recommended this medication, saying it helped other patients with symptoms like mine. He hadn't just chosen it randomly. I quickly searched online to be sure. But the side effects listed online only mentioned things like bloating and headaches. I wondered if pharmacists could customize the content. I mean, they're the ones who print the labels, right? I giggled. It was actually pretty funny. Not sure if changing drug side effects is legal or ethical, but you have to admit it's creative. I swallowed a small white pill, and it was incredibly effective. I didn't have any of the usual symptoms. No stomach pain, no bloating, no discomfort. I felt great, better than I had felt in years. I couldn't wait to get home and tell my husband, Doug, all about how Dr. Liu had miraculously found the right medication. I was amazed at modern medicine. The world suddenly became beautiful. Sounds dramatic, right? And I know IBS isn't even serious compared to other diseases. But when you live with discomfort and pain for a decade, and then one day it suddenly disappears without a trace, it feels like a curtain has been lifted, and the whole world becomes brighter. The house was empty when I got home from work. Doug said he would pick up our son, Benjamin, from a friend's house on the way home, and they would be back around 6 p.m. I had almost an hour, so I decided to cook dinner. Usually I stick to an IBS diet, but not today. While the chicken was frying on the stove, my phone rang. Doug, you won't believe it, I said. The new medication I'm taking, Carrie. As soon as I heard his voice, my heart dropped. I knew something was terribly wrong. I froze in the middle of the kitchen, chicken sizzling on the stove, boiling water gently bubbling. What? What about Benjamin? He said, his voice starting to tremble. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My sons, his voice choked. The neighbors, they have a pool, and oh no, please God, no. He kept talking, but I didn't hear anymore. My hands went numb, I collapsed to the floor, unable to stand. No, this can't be happening. It can't. We're home, I spun around. The door was wide open, and Benjamin burst into the house, running straight towards me. Jack followed, carrying a pizza box. My phone fell to the floor. As it fell, the screen lit up, just the home screen. No call was in progress. I ran to Benjamin, touching his face. He seemed real. I rummaged through my phone, checking recent call history. Nothing. What the hell, Carrie, are you okay? I heard Doug say, but his voice sounded distant through the buzzing in my ears. The medication. The small warning on the bottle. You may wish the side effects were physical. Was the medication causing hallucinations? I think I need to go to the hospital, I choked out. According to the tests, I was fine. When I showed the doctor the bottle of pills, he came to the same conclusion as me. Oh, the pharmacist must have altered the content. He shook his head. He could lose his license for this. But the pills are definitely Samira, right? They look like it. There's an X50 mark on the pill. It would be hard to fake unless they have a professional lab. He placed the bottle on the table. But I'll still send it to the lab. Maybe they mixed a little hallucinogen into the bottle, shook it well so it stuck to the pills. His eyes darted away, shaking his head in confusion. But I think I'd see dust at the bottom of the bottle if they did that, and I don't see anything. They said I could stay overnight for observation if I wanted, but since I seemed completely lucid, they didn't force me. I decided to go home. I felt the medication had worn off, the familiar stomach pain had returned. Hopefully, the hallucinations would disappear with it, and the drug test results would be back in 48 hours. I spent the evening with Benjamin and Doug, incredibly grateful to still have my wonderful son. I woke up with a start, drenched in sweat. I strained my ears, wondering what had woken me. I looked over at Doug, but he wasn't there. Doug, I called into the darkness. Silence. I looked at the bathroom, no light under the door. Quietly, I got out of bed and crept to Benjamin's room. He was sleeping peacefully in his bed, curled up under his Paw Patrol blanket. I was about to go back to my room when I heard a noise downstairs. Amidst coughing and groaning, I froze in the hallway, every muscle tense. Help! A faint voice echoed from downstairs, Doug's voice. I ran down the stairs, my feet pounding on the wood, but I saw it before I entered the kitchen, a pool of black blood spreading on the floor, flowing into the grout. I screamed, rushing. He was slumped in a chair, his shirt soaked in blood. They broke in, he choked out, his voice fading. Call the police. No, this can't be happening. I fumbled for my phone, but I had left it upstairs. Panicked, I rushed upstairs and burst into the room. I reached for my phone and stopped. Doug was in bed, snoring. Oh, it was a hallucination again. Doug, are you okay? I took a shaky breath. The Samira bottle, I remembered, was once-a-day medication. The effects probably wouldn't wear off until a full 24 hours had passed. Trembling, I climbed into bed with him. I love you, I whispered before lying down and closing my eyes. But I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. I ran downstairs, but I knew what I would see before I looked. A pool of blood, now dry and black broken glass shards scattered on the floor, sparkling in the morning sun, a slumped figure in the kitchen chair. Mom! I heard Benjamin call from behind me, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Go back to your room, I choked out. The hallucination was Doug sleeping peacefully in bed. What I saw in the kitchen was completely real. Carrie is still in the institution. She can't go home. Not because she's crazy, but because she can't trust anything she sees anymore. The test results. The pills were completely genuine Samira, no hallucinogens mixed in. The medication worked exactly as warned. No physical side effects, only that it caused reality and hallucination to swap places. Randomly, unpredictably. Carrie wrote one more thing. She said she still had 29 pills left in the bottle, and she didn't know what to do with them. Throw them away or keep them for when she wanted to escape this reality. Sometimes the worst things aren't what hurt your body, but what makes you no longer trust your own mind. Read your medication instructions carefully, everyone. Read them very carefully. At this moment in the tranquil space of the studio, I, Jeff, am with you again on the Late Night Tales program. The cold of the storm is biting, and perhaps nothing is more fitting than a story that can make you shiver, not just from the cold. Today I received a long email from a listener with the nickname Silent Granddaughter. She included a message. Jeff, I need to tell someone about this, about what I've just discovered about my family. Please read my story, even if it might make you disbelieve it. All right, let's listen to her story. Hello, Jeff and listeners of the show. I haven't seen my grandmother in over 10 years. After a fierce argument with my father, she moved out for good. I only found out about it when I cycled past her house and saw a for sale sign. My father would always deflect whenever I asked what happened between them, but I knew it must have been something terrible. A mother and son don't estrange themselves over trivial reasons. Something serious must have happened to make them deliberately avoid each other like that. Of course, I wanted to see my grandmother. I wanted to know what was said or what happened to change my family like that. I kept thinking she must have given my father her new address, so I begged him to let me visit her. But he adamantly refused. Years ago, I did a little amateur detective work, secretly opening a letter addressed to her. I recognized her handwriting from the birthday cards she used to send over the years. Of course, she scolded me for rummaging through her mail. After that, her mail was sent to a private P.O. box, preventing me from intercepting any more letters. Dear John, Mother asks for your forgiveness. That was all the letter said. Unfortunately, there was no return address. When my mother passed away in 2018, I stopped asking about my grandmother. Grief became our sole focus. For a long time, I only thought about my mother. Mom had struggled with mental health issues for years and went missing a few months before her body was found. I don't want to talk about that. I'm just setting the context for the terrifying story to come. To put it mildly, the past few years have been truly painful. I am now 24 years old and haven't asked my father about my grandmother since I was a teenager. To be honest, I had long decided that life had to go on, her life had to go on. Forcing him to relive past events would be heartless. I didn't need to know what happened to my grandmother. That ship had sailed. Dad was my only remaining family, so I didn't want to ruin our relationship by repeatedly asking about her. But last night, something unexpected happened. Kara, Dad called from the living room, come sit with me for a bit. Swallowing hard, I cautiously entered the room and chose the armchair opposite the sofa where Dad was leaning back. I was terrified, thinking it was probably time to talk about me still living at home. I graduated college a few years ago, have a job in sales, but my salary isn't enough for me to move out. Are you okay, Dad? I asked. He sighed. Yes, I'm fine. But I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. Oh, really? I joked, hoping a dad joke might ease the tension, but it didn't. You haven't asked me about your grandmother in years, he said after a long silence. I was stunned. Dad hadn't mentioned his mother, not once since they estranged for unknown reasons. I barely knew how to respond. After a few awkward seconds, I realized I was just sitting there, mouth agape, staring in silence. Dad adjusted his reading glasses, which were perched precariously on his sweaty nose. He looked anxious. Is this finally it? I wondered. Dad was slowly coming to terms with everything. Kara, you're old enough to make your own decisions now anyway, he said, and I often wonder if you still want to see your grandmother. I shrugged. I stopped asking about her because I saw it made you sad. Dad smiled faintly. I know, and I appreciate that. We've been through a lot, but what I want to say is that I know your age. You're an adult now. I worry sometimes you might go looking for her yourself. She knows it would be hard for you to find her because she doesn't want to be found. But who knows, she might try to contact you. She might have already tried. I shook my head. She hasn't contacted me. Dad seemed a little relieved. Good, that's good. But I realized that if I really want to keep you safe, I have to tell you why you shouldn't contact her. I nodded. It would be better if I knew why you two estranged. Suddenly, it was Dad's turn to swallow hard. He shifted in his seat, trying to buy time. My eyes wandered to the night sky outside the living room window. Rain poured down onto the asphalt of the deserted street, and the solitary street lamp was barely visible through the sheet of rain on the glass. Grandma and Grandpa always had a strained relationship, Dad finally began. That's why I had so many problems. I just hope that resentment hasn't affected you. My parents were always good to me, but they weren't good to each other, and they didn't seem to realize how much that affected me as a child. I nodded gently. I still remember Grandma and Grandpa arguing constantly throughout my childhood. Then one day, he left her for good. Dad always told Mom that she was a bit harsh on Dad about his long business trips. He was just trying to provide for the family. But when he left her, she was naturally sympathetic and sided with Grandma. So I don't want you to think I'm the bad guy, Dad said. I shook my head. Never. Dad, you're rambling. I only have one question, don't I? He said. What changed? You don't have to tell me, I began. I have to tell you, he interrupted. If you stop me now, I might never have the courage again. All right, Dad, you found something right after Grandpa left, Kara. You were cleaning out your grandmother's attic, and there was a cardboard box labeled collection. It was full of photos. Dad paused, his voice hoarse, before continuing. Pictures of missing people, I later found out, and each person's story was the same. Candid shots from a distance in parks and crowded shopping malls, men and women. That wasn't what scared me, but the photos taken in the attic. Unimaginable brutality. I won't say anything more. Trembling at the confession I never thought I'd hear from my father's mouth, I sat in silence, trying to process this horrifying information. The wheels in my head started turning, but I still hadn't realized what I was suppressing. When Dad confronted Grandma about it, she burst into tears, he whispered hoarsely. She said that's why Grandpa left. He discovered her secret. Of course, Dad said he'd call the police immediately, and she just said she understood. She didn't try to stop him, but she fled that very night, and 14 years later, there's still no trace of her. Dad just hopes that wherever she went, she stopped hurting others, stopped taking lives. And that's my terrible story, all of it. I couldn't find any appropriate words, so I stopped looking. We both sat in silence for a long time, watching the rain continue to beat down on the world outside. A world that suddenly looked a little darker to me. Eventually, I went to bed but couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, though not for the reasons one might think. Dad's story didn't quite add up. I remembered something. When I was little, I occasionally stayed at my grandparents' house, and they often let me invite one or two friends because I was an only child and they didn't want their grandchild to be bored staying with two old people. They knew who I would invite. It was always the same two friends, Sophie and Francesca. In fact, my grandparents often insisted I invite those two best friends, and my friends loved my grandparents. Mostly, they liked the sweet treats my grandparents gave us before bed, stuffing us with sugary delights that should have stimulated our minds and kept us awake. Yet we always slept like the dead. But not always. One night when I was about 6 or 7, I woke up in the early hours. It was still dark, and I felt terribly dizzy, as if someone had wrapped a rubber band around my brain to stop the blood flow. After a few seconds, I realized where I was. Francesca was fast asleep, but Sophie's sleeping bag was empty, and my bedroom door, my grandmother's old room, was wide open. I stared out into the dark upstairs hallway through the doorway. My eyes were blurry, though I was sure I couldn't see anything anyway, but my ears worked perfectly. That must have been what woke me up. The creaking floorboards above my head, a series of groans from the attic. My first thought was that Sophie was playing up there, and I worried my grandparents would scold us. So I crept out of bed, almost fainting as I did so, and tiptoed into the dark hallway, trying to orient myself in the dark. I didn't want to turn on the light for fear of my grandparents finding out. But the attic floorboards continued to groan, along with a muffled voice, and I knew it was only a matter of minutes before my grandparents would wake up too. "Sophie," I hissed, hoping my friend would hear me, but my grandparents wouldn't. The creaking immediately stopped, and I held my breath as I finally accepted one thing: those sounds were too loud to be Sophie's footsteps. I quickly tiptoed back to bed as the floorboards, like wooden piano keys, creaked along the ceiling. I managed to slip under the covers and squeezed my eyes shut as the attic door burst open with a loud thud. Next was the sound of someone heavy climbing down the ladder. I remember trying frantically to pretend to sleep as the shadowy figure stumbled across the hallway. I kept my eyes tightly shut, trying not to cry as I heard the figure's heavy breathing stop at the door. The figure was clearly looking at me. I didn't need to open my eyes to know that. "It's not Sophie, it's Grandpa," that's what I told myself. The monster shuffled clumsily into the room, dropped something heavy onto the floor, then walked to my bed. I still remember the foul breath on my face. I trembled under the covers but tried to stay calm and prayed the monster wouldn't eat me, and finally, it slowly backed out of the room, closing the door. I remember finally opening my eyes and seeing Sophie lying in her sleeping bag, still completely unconscious after returning from the attic. Her hair was messy and she looked different. I didn't understand it then. She probably didn't know what had happened to her up there. I hoped so. Now I know. Of course, something I was too young to understand then. There was something wrong with the candy. Just as there was something wrong with my grandparents always insisting I invite Sophie and Francesca. But I remember one more thing, something that shattered a part of my father's story. It wasn't Grandma who invited my friends and gave us candy, it was Grandpa. Following a friend's advice online, I decided not to tell my father about what I had inferred from his story, but I had to find out the truth. The next morning, I went back to my old ways of pestering my father. "You must know more, Dad," I said. "She might still be harming others." He frowned. "Kara, stop it. She's very old now. Even if the police don't find her, she'll eventually pass away. Just forget about all this. I thought if I told you the whole story, you'd stop asking." But that's not the whole story, I thought to myself. "You must have read some of the letters she sent. Perhaps she left clues," I said. "I read all of them and gave them all to the police. She hasn't written to me in about 5 years, so just drop it. I beg you," Dad pleaded. "I'm sorry, Dad, but I can't forget it. I keep thinking about those poor people, how they must have suffered. And that's what you said. You didn't even see the photos. I don't know what she did. It must have been much worse for you, Dad. You must have wanted to do something too, right?" "Don't guilt trip me," Dad said. "You're right, I wanted to do something, Kara. That's why I've been helping the police for years. I'm not protecting her. She may be my mother, but what she did to those people. Yes, you're right. You don't know what she did, and I don't want you to know. No human being could do those things. I'm sorry." I sighed. That was a cruel move. I just feel bad knowing she's still out there. And as you said, I'm an adult. I make my own decisions, so I want you to know that I won't let this go. I'm going to find her. I thought Dad would yell at me, but he didn't. He sat thoughtfully at the breakfast table, stirring his spoon in his cereal bowl, and I patiently waited for his answer. Once again, he surprised me. "I'll tell you one thing," he finally said. I leaned eagerly across the table. "The chief inspector checks on us regularly," Dad continued. "She kept you out of it, you probably don't remember him, but he always updated me on the investigation, and he told me about the immediate connection he drew after the police thoroughly reviewed thousands of photos. 36 victims, all with brown hair. It could just be a coincidence, but the inspector didn't think so. Serial killers often have patterns." I immediately shivered. Another horrific memory resurfaced from a dark corner of my mind. A memory I wasn't brave enough to share with Dad. Around 8 years old, I distinctly remember waking up after a sleepover at my grandparents' house and discovering a lock of my hair, my brown hair, was missing. It had been clumsily cut from the left side of my head during the night. I blamed Francesca because she was the most mischievous of the three of us. but she blamed Sophie. No one took responsibility. My parents scolded me severely for it. I really hoped Dad didn't remember that, otherwise he might put two and two together. Fortunately, his memory was terrible. And of course, I understood why Grandpa kept insisting I invite Sophie and Francesca. Both had brown hair. I had a blonde friend named Lucy who occasionally came over, but she was never invited to stay overnight. It all made me feel a little sick. That probably doesn't help your investigation, Dad said. But we're not police, are we? Best leave it to the professionals. And you won't tell me anything about the contents of the letters? I asked. I'll never believe this, but she didn't give you any details about where she was. Kara, Dad sighed, she doesn't want to be found. So what did she write in the letters? I asked. Dad shrugged. Nothing helpful to the police, but I still gave them the evidence. She mostly asked for forgiveness, and she asked about you, of course, and about your mother, too. She was angry when she mentioned you, too. Maybe she was worried about us, I replied casually without thinking. Dad raised an eyebrow at me. Kara, I know she's your grandmother and you love her, but she's not the kind, sweet woman you think she is. That's a lie. A false front she maintained for decades. It took me years to accept that, so I understand you need time, too. I just don't want you living in an illusion. I nodded dejectedly at the prospect of never getting answers. But then Dad, as usual, dropped the biggest bombshell as an afterthought. Perhaps in one letter she wrote something that reminded me of my childhood. I love you, my northern angel. She used to call me that every time we visited Ketz. Actually, I think our whole family went together, didn't we? He asked. I nodded. I remembered her calling me the exact same thing. Anyway, the inspector contacted the Ketz police, but that lead went nowhere, he said and shrugged. But that statement held significant meaning for me. Dad had forgotten one thing, so I excused myself and went upstairs to the main bathroom. As expected, on the forgotten shelf, it was still there, red. The rather large Angel of the North statue Grandma had bought during our holiday. A souvenir to remember the happy times, and she said that to all of us. Happy times, asterisk those words repeated in the letter to Dad, seemed like a strange illusion. However, after I lifted the statue, something no one had touched in over a decade, everything became clear. A piece of paper was taped to the bottom of the statue. It read, John, something is wrong. When you read this message, you'll surely know. Otherwise, you might have accidentally found it. I suppose that's better than it lying untouched for years unknown. Either way, you need to tell the police that your mother and I are in Devon. Do you remember your father's old mobile home? We'll be there. He's about to leave Lancaster, and I'll follow when the time is right. That's the only way he'll spare them. I can't do anything else to protect you. He's always watching. Don't let him know you found this note. Don't tell him anything. I don't have time to write more. I've been here too long. My heart pounded. I immediately crumpled the note and put it in my pocket. I didn't want Dad to find out. Not yet. Too much had changed. He was a broken man and wouldn't be able to bear it. But this was perhaps one of the most disturbing pieces of the puzzle. My grandfather forced my grandmother to take the blame for his crimes. He threatened our safety. Although the note was from 2009, I knew I had to go to Devon. My grandparents might have been dead long ago, but I wouldn't let this horror rest without finding out the truth for myself. And fortunately, I knew exactly where to find the mobile home. It was also a family holiday my grandparents had repeated with me when I was a child. Dad had gone to work, and I called in sick. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Dad. I jumped in the car, set the GPS, and drove 5 grueling hours from Lancaster down to Devon. When I arrived, it was no longer the beautiful place in my memory. England had endured torrential rain for the past few days, and the sky was painted a dull, almost colorless gray. The horizon was an endless void, the ground rolling hills, and amidst a nearly abandoned mobile home campsite, an old, dilapidated static home stood tall. My grandfather's mobile home. Yes, it was still there. And as I climbed out of the car, a wave of dread enveloped my entire body. The realization of what I was doing. I was no longer sitting and telling stories with Dad in the comfort of our home. I was no longer reminiscing about near-death experiences from childhood. This was real. I was standing before the monster's lair. My boots squelched on the damp walkway leading to the mobile home's front door. The rain beat down relentlessly, but I was glad for it. The deafening sound of the rain muffled my footsteps. I had the element of surprise on my side. And as I reached the front door, I took a few long, steady breaths before finally knocking. Surprisingly, with just one knock, the door swung wide open. I knew I shouldn't step inside. The monster's dark lair terrified me more than any childhood sleepover. The knowledge of his disgusting crimes, the crimes of a true human being, made me fear him more than any imagined monster. I bravely took one step at a time and crossed the threshold. Clearly, no one had set foot in that place for at least a few years. The walls were pitch black, no light filtered through the curtains. There were moldy dishes in the sink, and I screamed as a rat scurried from a cabinet, disappearing somewhere in the house's clutter. "Grandma," I called. I don't know why I announced myself. I guess I had accepted that no one could possibly live there. I should have called the police as Grandma suggested, I thought. But if I did that, I would lose my only chance to find some evidence. I was tired of people hiding the truth from me. I continued walking, flipping every light switch I could find. Nothing, perhaps due to unpaid electricity bills. Another good sign that no one had lived here for a while. Instead, I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, took it out, and turned on the flashlight. I wish I hadn't. The open living area included the kitchen and 2 spacious sofas, spacious for a mobile home. It occupied most of the enormous 30 x 10-foot space, and every inch of every wall was covered in hair. Hundreds of thousands of brown strands, most dyed red, and the devilish decor was knotted in a crisscross pattern, forming an intricate blanket. The interwoven pain of a nightmare man and his terrified victims, nauseating beyond words. I bent down and vomited onto the floor. At least it was a relief to see something other than the horror covering the walls. I quickly shone my flashlight down the hallway leading to the back of the mobile home. I had seen enough, and the sooner I could say I had checked every inch of the mobile home, the better. The bathroom was another forgotten, moldy room, free of hair. Thank God. I proceeded towards the last room of the house. The bedroom, a room that emitted such a strong stench that I feared it more than the horror behind me. I didn't want to open the door, really didn't want to, but I had to. My hands sweating, gripping the doorknob, I gently pushed the door, and nausea rose in my throat again as I saw another room lined with meticulously woven hair. Hair not only covered the walls, but also the floor, the furniture, and every inch of the bed, every inch of the room. But that wasn't the most horrifying thing. The most horrifying thing was the clump of hair mixed with the bedsheets. My grandmother was just bones. Though I only guessed that because she was also completely covered in hair, there was no way to identify the body. However, I didn't need to get close to know she was dead, and I didn't want to. My grandmother was interwoven with the handcrafted brown hair blanket of the bed, which had spread like fungus throughout the interior of the house. I don't know if it would have been better or worse to have seen a corpse beneath instead. I turned to run. But on my way out, I noticed the closet door was slightly ajar. It seemed to beckon me, even though I knew a greater horror lurked within. I had to do it. Of course, that's why I had come so far. Stepping onto the soft, hair-covered floor, I walked towards the closet and pushed the door fully open. I screamed. "The collection!" Those words were printed on a thin piece of paper attached to the inside of the empty wooden closet door, and a new collection of photos had been pasted onto the back panel. Photos of me. My first day of university in Manchester in 2017. Photos of me in clubs, restaurants, even a picture of me sleeping. He had broken into my dorm room and watched me sleep. I thought my stomach was empty, but I surprised myself, unleashing another torrent of horrifying bile. After a few minutes of gasping, I composed myself and looked back into the closet. At least he was only focused on me, I thought, praying he hadn't taken anyone else's life. But that wasn't true. On the inside of the other door was another collection of candid photos, pictures of my mother. Last night after calling the police, I returned home and I told Dad everything. He took my phone and started scrolling through the pictures I had taken. "Oh my God," Dad cried, pushing the phone back into my hand. "Do you think," I started, swallowing hard, "do you think Grandpa could be responsible for Mom's death?" Dad grimaced in pain. "Kara, Dad, I don't want to. I don't know if I can bear to grieve for your mother twice." I understood why he found it easier to believe Mom took her own life than to believe someone else had taken it. And perhaps I didn't want the police to discover the truth either. Perhaps I had nothing left to give. What I mean is, Mom's death in 2018, while appearing to be suicide, was incredibly horrific. A shattered body in a car accident, and I wondered why Mom would want to end her life in such a painful way. Today, I called in sick again and spent the entire day poring over the photos, searching for answers. I kept stopping at the picture of me sleeping in my university dorm room. "He's always watching." That's what Grandma wrote in the note. Did he come from Devon to watch us? Perhaps he had returned to his hiding place in Devon, but must have abandoned that place after killing his wife. Where is he now? I shivered. There was a picture of Mom driving on the highway. A picture Grandpa took while also driving. He was following Mom, only about 20 meters behind. In the picture, I could see his car's dashboard and his left hand on the steering wheel. His wrist wore a glittering gold Rolex, but most importantly, the photo captured his BMW's crooked hood emblem, crooked in a distinctive way. A sinking feeling enveloped me. "Dad," I called. He